In case you don't realize, when I say well-meaning, I'm being sarcastic. I haven't thought about this happening in years. I was 13 or 14 at the time. I'm 26 now. Let's start with a little bit of backstory. I was adopted by my paternal grandmother. She has a bit of an old-fashioned idea on how young people should meet or date, usually set up by parents or meeting at church. I call her mom as she had me my entire life. For what I'm about to describe, I don't blame her. She was bamboozled. Mom and I were close with a family that lived a short walk from us in the same apartment complex. In this family, living in their home were a grandmother, mother, and her 2 young sons that I sometimes babysat. We became close because Mom was a seamstress and she did some sewing for the mother. The boys took an instant liking to me and all of us hit it off. My mom and the grandmother were close in age, both Southern, and seemed to have similar viewpoints on things, such as aforementioned topics, so they spoke on the phone often. One day, when the mother and her sons are out, the mom and I are at home cooking and the grandma calls the house. She asked if I wouldn't mind coming over to cheer up her grandson. He was upset and rattled because his brother recently passed away. Mom asked all the questions you'd expect of a stereotypical old-fashioned matriarch. Will you, the grandma, be there the whole time? How long will you keep her there? How old is your grandson? Of course, all the answers were favorable, or else she would have flat out said no, but she was told that the grandma would be watching us, that I didn't have to stay long, and that this boy was only a couple of years older than me. Mom said I should go. It would be nice of me to do something kind for a person with a broken heart. I agreed because we recently had a death in the family. I wanted to help. I said I would go. While the grandma was still on the phone, she said, "Who knows Lulu Loopy? I may have just set you up with a nice boyfriend." On the other end of the phone, the grandma said, "I hope so." The distance between our apartments. Mom could watch me walk all the way to their place. She stood in the door watching. The grandma stood in her door also watching. I went there, and after the 2 of them waved to one another, the grandma closed the door behind me, closed the blinds, and fluffed my hair. I always had messy bangs, and she seemed determined to fix them. My mom always did the same whenever my hair got messy. I assumed it was one of their old lady things, thinking that a girl should always be tidy, so I didn't think anything of it. In these apartments, we had furnished basements. In ours, it had been turned to a play area and office, and in theirs, a TV or video game room. She took me down the stairs. I assumed this teenage boy was playing video games. Imagine my surprise when this boy turned out to be a man who looked like he could have been the same age as my dad. My dad was about 34 at this point in my life. Kind of froze, not sure what to say or think. The grandma introduced us. She kept trying to draw his attention to me. Isn't she pretty? Look at all of her freckles. She's got pretty eyes. She pulled me onto the couch and made me sit down. She said that she had some phone calls to make, so she was leaving us there. The grandma ascended the stairs and closed the door, and I was scared she may have locked it. I realized she lied to my mom. She wasn't going to watch us, nor was this guy only a few years older than me. Once she was gone, he became agitated, wringing his hands, pacing, and speaking in garbled phrases. He was sweating when he looked at me. I tried not to panic. I wanted to run, but was thinking that girls who run in horror movies all die, so I sat still and let him pace. He sat on the couch and started rocking. I tried talking to him, but it didn't take me long to realize he had some sort of developmental disability. I realized he wasn't dangerous, just very uncomfortable with the female stranger, and it was probably likely he didn't realize my age. I turned a music station on the TV, and he calmed down and began singing along. Eventually, he fell asleep on the opposite end of the couch. Maybe an hour or so later, the grandma came to check on us. I smiled and said, "Thanks for having me, but I have chores to do. I should get back home to my mom." The grandma agreed after telling me to come back and visit her grandson sometime again, walked me to the door. I walked back to our apartment and hurried inside, locking the door behind me. Mom was startled. They usually called before I left their house. She looked at me and asked if the boy and I got along. That was not a boy, I blurted instantly. She asked what happened, and I said, "He's old enough to be one of your biological kids." I have never seen such a look in her eyes. I'm sure she would have murdered that woman if she could have. She sat me down and made me relay everything to her. She asked repeatedly if he touched me and even looked over for what I suspect is evidence of sexual assault, even asking to smell my breath. She asked one final time if I was sure he didn't touch me and if I wanted to go to the doctor or police. I said no. I don't think that young man had anything to do with it. From his reaction, I don't even think he knew she invited me over. Mom gave me a big bowl of ice cream and stayed close to me for the rest of the evening as if she were afraid I was going to be taken away from her. The next morning, I heard her on the phone yelling. I guess she called the grandma and gave her an earful. I don't know what she said, but I never saw anybody in that family again. I don't know if Mom was making sure we avoided them or if they were trying to avoid us. I suspect it's the latter. My mom is very scary when angry. So, Grandma, who put your friend's daughter in a situation where she could have been abused, let's not meet again. For your sake, my mom might end you. I have this thing that I do. It's simply called drinking way too much tea. Like to the point where I actually have a whole cupboard stuffed with jars filled with loose leaf tea, and I have at least 3 boxes of tea bags kept in my room for when I don't want to get up and make a new pot all the time. It's gotten to the point that when I go into a local tea shop, the staff greet me and ask if I like more of their black blood orange tea or perhaps their green dragon mix, which I tend to buy often. Even the staff at the local supermarket recognize me by now because I always buy the same boxes of tea bags. This became a problem about a year ago. They hired a new guy at the local tea shop. Let's call him Tom. He seemed like a nice guy, very enthusiastic about things, and seemed to fit in well with the staff. He was helpful, and he got familiar with their stock really fast. He actually introduced me to some of their own tea, a mix they called Sea Breeze. I didn't think twice about talking to him, because I talked to everybody else in that shop, and I've been going there for years. Not to mention that it was the only town around for miles that even had a tea shop of its own. Besides, Tom was really nice. After about 2 months, he asked me out though. It came sort of out of the blue, especially considering that we didn't know each other. I told him I wasn't interested in that and that I'd recently come out of a pretty bad breakup and just didn't want to date anyone for a while. He seemed to take it fine. Just said, yeah, I get that, and dropped it. At least I thought he dropped it. Maybe a week after that, I came to the supermarket to get some more tea bags. I didn't pay much attention to anything. I just dropped it by the cashiers and grabbed my wallet. When I was about to take my card out to pay, I suddenly heard a very familiar voice laugh and say, "Hey you, Lady Grey, right? You love that blend." Tom was sitting there dressed in the uniform of the staff. I got a little thrown off, seeing as how the supermarket hardly ever hired anyone new. Believe me, I'd asked many times while looking for a job. "Didn't know you worked there," I told him, and he smiled at me. "Yeah, I got a job here just the other day. Apparently one of their staff up and quit, so they need someone. And, well, I have a friend of a friend." I didn't ask more about it. This went on for a while, seeing Tom at both the tea shop and the supermarket. When it came to the latter, though, I always seemed to arrive just as his shift was almost up, and he would ask if he could walk with me for a bit. I always told him that it wasn't a good idea because I had quite a long way home and he normally got around by car. Whenever he would ask this, I always got a weird feeling. You know when there's this one person who you feel pretty indifferent about, but whenever they ask something like this, you feel like you have to make an excuse to get away? That's it. For all that, it was fine to talk to Tom. Something made me think I shouldn't walk anywhere with him, though. I lied when I said I had a long way to go. Truth be told, I live maybe 10 minutes from the supermarket, but it's a little out of the way in a secluded area of the town where few people live. Lots of abandoned houses, and the apartment building where I live is pretty much the epitome of there's no one there to help, or rather, nobody who would even care to help. Besides being a pretty small girl, around 1.58 centimeters, albeit one who works out and has a good deal of muscle, I wasn't really comfortable with the thought of being in a secluded place with anybody bigger than me. Little by little, I could tell that Tom was getting frustrated about me saying no all the time. He'd get this pinched look on his face, and he'd use a very flat voice when saying, "Yeah, that's fine." When I come to the tea shop, he'd ask his boss if he could have a short break just so he could chat with me for a bit. When this had been going on for a while, his boss at the tea shop once took me aside when he wasn't at work and asked for a word. She started asking me if Tom was a bother to me and if he'd been doing anything untoward, so to say. I admitted that he made me uncomfortable when he asked to be alone with me. "You are the only customer he does this with," she told me. "He seems really indifferent to anyone else. I mean, yeah, he helps them, but he doesn't get so enthusiastic about them." This started setting off proper warning bells in my head, and I asked her if perhaps I could know when he actually worked so I could come in when he wasn't there. I wasn't about to stop going there just because of him. She agreed and gave me a schedule, even her own phone number so I could call her if something was up. Let me tell you, Tom got really irritated when he didn't see me at the tea shop anymore. If I went to the supermarket, he would be pushy about asking me where I was and why I wasn't there. "You go like every week," he'd say. "How come I never see you?" I pulled some BS story about my routine needing a change and how my work hours didn't work with the old one anymore, and I could tell he didn't believe me. So about another month went by. He kept asking why he didn't see me more often and why I wouldn't take a walk with him. Then one morning, I got a letter in the mail. Just the wording alone told me it was him, though the content itself was pretty obvious. "You are such a liar. Your routine needed a change. Your work hours didn't fit. You always lied to me. You work from home and you told me that. You work from home and you go get tea whenever. I saw you, you know. I was in my car outside the tea shop and you showed up when I wasn't working. Why are you avoiding me? Aren't I nice to you? I thought girls liked that when guys are actually nice to them. Guess you're just another little bitch who wants bad boys or whatever." Okay, that was out of line. Still, can't you just come in as you used to? I just want to talk, and why not walk a little bit with me? I can always just walk back to my car, you know? Maybe I could give you a ride home. Not like I don't know where you live anyway. I like talking to you. You pay attention and you listen. Just give me a chance, yeah? You can't still be hung up on your ex. It's been ages. If you're going to move on from an asshole, move on with a nice guy. I would like to say that I freaked out and made a fuss, but I didn't. I just picked up the phone, called the owner of the tea shop, and explained about Tom in the letter. The owner stated that he had stopped coming into work lately altogether and that she was going to fire him at any rate. This was just the nail in the coffin. She promised that she was going to talk to him about it and tell him that he was lucky I hadn't called the police yet. Well, she did, and it didn't stop. I kept getting letters. When I saw him at the supermarket, he would be agitated, and he would try harder than before to get me to walk with him. Once it even got to the point where he grabbed my arm and tried to convince me to just come with him to let him show me something. Luckily, at that point, there were security guards around, and they went over to us and asked me if there was a problem. I only had to look at Tom to make him let go. I think he knew that if he kept going or tried to claim that we knew each other well, I would tell them. Then came that last night when I'd been to the supermarket pretty late. I'd been wrapped up in work for a few days and hadn't had time to go to the shop, so I ran down to the supermarket to pick up food and other necessities that I was missing. And Tom was there, not working, but just waiting for me when I came out with heavy bags in my arms. He didn't approach. I just passed him by, hoping to convey that I was in a hurry, and headed out. I'd gotten maybe halfway home when I looked over my shoulder and saw his car stop just around the corner. Convinced now that he was following me and hoping to catch me alone, I decided to take a shortcut home. There's a path that cuts through the forested area around where I live, and it's a very narrow one. Difficult to walk along with shopping bags, but at least it would let me get out of sight for a bit. I hurried around the next corner, listening for the sound of the car as it started up again, and dodged into the forest. I crouched down behind a bush for a while, and I heard the car drive up and down the road several times. I'll admit that I felt triumphant that such a small thing could throw him off. He apparently didn't know where I went. The path is pretty hard to see if you don't know where it is, so perhaps he was unaware of its existence as well. After a bit, I got up and hurried along. Getting home wasn't very difficult at all, and I thought it was over and done with. But when I got inside and went up the stairs, I looked out through one of the windows in the stairwell. His car was just coming up the road towards my house. I ran as best as I could up the stairs and hurried into my flat and slammed the door. Now I was truly freaked out. It was easy enough to deal with it before. Letters could be shredded or burnt, and the shops were always manned with staff for security. But this was entirely different. Now he was at my house. I had locked the door behind me, and while I was unpacking the groceries, I heard the handle being turned and the door being pulled at. I didn't react much. The lock was new and the door was sturdy, so nobody could get in unless I opened the door for them. There was just one problem: the mail slot. I heard it squeak as it was pushed open, and I heard his voice. "What are you running from? It's just me." I didn't answer. I stood still in the kitchen and listened. There were continuous scratching noises coming from the door now, and he kept talking, telling me that he wasn't going to do anything bad, that he just wanted to see me. The longer I just stood there and did nothing, the more aggressive he got. It sounded like he was trying to kick the door down, all the while shouting about how I was a bitch, how unfair I was being to him, and how I got him fired. The last one, yeah, fair enough. The rest, not so much. Then the noise just abruptly stopped. I thought for a moment that maybe a neighbor had gone out into the stairwell to tell him to shut the heck up and leave. I waited a while longer, just standing there and listening intently, until I finally managed to relax and move again. I moved towards the hallway, hoping that I was moving really quietly, to go to my little office. I was right in front of the door when the mail slot squeaked open again, and A hand dropped something in through it. It was a burning cloth, and I could smell the stench of gasoline. I began screaming and ran to fetch water to put the fire out, and as I did, I heard Tom laughing outside my door. I knew you were in there. Though I managed to put the fire out, he wasn't leaving. I called the police, but they told me that there was no patrol available to help. The fastest they could get to me was in 2 hours. I was stuck there in my flat with this creep outside my door, shouting threats and abuse at me for 2 hours. All this while none of my neighbors came to help. When the police did arrive, they arrested Tom. Apparently, there had been several more calls from my neighbors. The reason they didn't come to help was that they were worried that he was armed somehow. And well, can't blame them. I was later told that the police did find a machete in Tom's car, as well as 3 cans of gasoline and a lot of matches. He could have gone at any point to fetch any of these. But there's more. It turns out that the only reason Tom was ever hired by anyone was that he used a fake name. Technically, he didn't exist, hence why no one ever found anything criminal about him. But the police found him in their database eventually. He had done this in another town to another girl. She wasn't quite so lucky. He'd been to jail for what he'd done to her, but gotten out early on good behavior. I don't know the full details of the other incident, but I know that she lived though. When she was found, she was so badly burnt that she was unrecognizable. So this was about 5 months ago. I don't remember it with complete clarity, and I'm not the best at storytelling events from my life, but bear with me. I'll do my best. This was about 2 a.m. in downtown Denver. A friend of ours hosts a D&D session every Sunday. I and my partner normally stay the night, but we had plans the next Monday and had to go early. We said our goodbyes to everybody, grab our bags, and head out. It wasn't a long walk at all to the car, not even a block away. I and my SO started walking and chatting about the session. Then we both got silent at the same time. Somebody was behind us. I don't know how, but we both knew he was going to be bad news. He continued to follow us to the parking garage, and right before we entered, he spoke up with, "Are you ladies 18 or older?" Now, I'm a bigger girl, 5'10", and more than know how to hold my own against creeps. This guy struck me as different. He was a good foot taller than me, a blonde, blue-eyed male with one heck of a disgusting smile. Me being the dumb, polite person I am, I said something like, yes, why? And he proceeded to start saying things. "Well, do you pay your taxes?" With a quick response of, "Sorry, we aren't really at that stage of our lives yet." He quickly responds with a long rant about how taxes are terrible and you should never pay them. "They're using our taxes to kill people all the time," he said. "The government is killing people. Everyone is killing people, and they get away with it too easily." At this point, he begins to move closer and closer. My partner is backing up into the garage, and my dumbass is too scared to move, just trying to keep him focused on me rather than her. She gets within a few inches of my face. I try to casually step back, keep my movements looking natural, and straighten my back out, compensating for the fact that this person is larger than me. His breath was horrid. You could smell the alcohol with every single word that came out of his mouth, and his blue wristband was still on. I don't know if that's a bar thing. All I know is he had one. He continues on with his rant. My SO tries to argue back a bit. He starts to move away from me towards her. After a few glances between me and her, we catch on that we need to just go with whatever this guy says. When she stops arguing, his rant goes from taxes to political figures and genocide. You know, I could kill anyone I want and get away with it. Anyone can. The government is watching, but they don't care. They'll never know. His words were not making sense at all. "We are killing this planet, and it could be solved if we had less of a population," he said. Mind you, this guy was staying as close as possible. If either of us went out on our phones or our watches, he'd shift to them. Not to compliment him, but he was really perceptive for somebody I assume was drunk out of their mind. The conversation continues for about 5, maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like an hour. I feel disgusted with myself for it, but I'm agreeing with everything he's saying. At one point, he seemed to completely forget about my SO. I introduced myself using my character name and shake his hand, which allowed me to see a bunch of track marks on his arm. I'm freaking out on the inside, thinking I'm going to get stabbed today. I've never even been in a fight. How the heck do I handle this? All the while smiling and agreeing. Then his behavior shifts. Still staying way too close to me, he starts scratching himself all over, reaching into his left pocket over and over every time he says kill or references. Honestly, at this point, I was more mad than scared and started trying to work around him as stepping back was just leading me to a wall. It wasn't working no matter how hard I tried to walk or where I tried to go. He was always right there in my face, talking about killing anyone he wanted and saying that it would solve the world's problems if people just went out and killed hundreds of others. I got fed up with it, stepped to my right, then quickly to his left, and backed up straight out the garage. He followed, so did my partner behind him. We were finally out in the open again. I sent so many desperate looks to people walking by as he kept getting more and more pushy and ever closer to me. So much so that he was almost chest to chest with me. I don't know what came over me, but I grabbed my SO's arm. Missed it by a long shot, she said. What? I mustered the best smile. I possibly could, and said, I just want to hold your hand. As a gay person with a few homophobic and crazy people encounters, this was my worst idea ever. She handed me her hand though. I pulled her by me, and this man that seemed like a huge threat backed up so quickly, saying, Oh, you two are together. Yeah, no, I'm cool with that. Have a great night. This boy, who had been doing whatever he was doing, turned tail because we were gay. The one time my sexuality has probably saved me rather than put me in danger. We waited until he was far up the street, and then went straight to the car. The second we got in, we locked the doors and drove off. I was shaking the whole car ride home. We actually passed him later down the road. He and I made direct eye contact. A few days ago, I was sitting on the floor in the subway station, waiting for the next train and charging my phone on the wall outlet. I'd been there for maybe 15 minutes watching the trains go by and doodling on my phone. I look up from my phone to see an average-looking late teenage man staring at me with doe eyes. You're beautiful, he says. Gee, thanks, I mutter, unplugging my phone. He leans over. Nice boots you got there. May I take a closer look? The guy doesn't seem threatening, and the platform is filling with people, so I don't feel like I'm in danger. Maybe he's interested in shoes. Sure, take a look, I almost say, but he's already kneeling and touching the material. He looks at me all excited. Is this real leather? No, it's synthetic. They're from a discount chain, so probably not. He looks slightly disappointed and straightens himself. Well, are you in the market to buy new boots anytime soon? He says in a monotone voice. Nope, I already have one pair. But it's good to have a collection. What? I can't really afford to buy another, to be honest. I say, standing up. A lady standing next to me is looking at me, but when I mouth help, she looks away and blushes. I didn't mean right now. I mean down the line, the man says. He rummages through his backpack and pulls out a crumpled women's fashion catalog for sellers. He turns to a dog-eared page that lists various styles of women's boots. Would you ever consider wearing something like these? Those aren't really my style, I say. What the heck, is this guy a sales rep or something? Oh, he puts away the catalog. I look at his shoes, which are black orthopedic shoes that only a mom could buy. What's your style? I ask jokingly. Maybe he'll talk about himself and I can sneak out of this conversation. Nope. I like when women wear these kind of boots, he said. They look seductive in them. Nope, not a sales rep, just a fetishist. Awesome. The man pulls out his phone, he goes to his photos and starts scrolling through them. Lots of famous women wear these boots, he says. Do you know who this is? He shows me a paparazzi picture of Lindsay Lohan. He continues to scroll through pictures of female celebrities, all wearing thigh-high ruched boots. You won't know who this woman is, but this is JoJo. Oh, I know JoJo. She's saying too little too late, right? I ask. The man looks at me funny. I don't know what she does, but she wears the boots. That's all that matters, he said. He scrolls to a picture of Katy Perry. I bet you know who this is. He zooms in on her boots, then zooms out and slowly zooms in on her boobs. Yeah, everyone loves Katy Perry, he said. Wow, you're really into boots, I comment. Well, it was nice to meet you. Randy. He extends his hand out for a dead fish handshake. And you are. Insert fake name here. Great. Let's ride the subway together. Heck no. Oh wait, I say. Is this the southbound platform? Randy informs me it's the northbound platform. Oh dang, I'm on the wrong one. Better go get to the other side. Bye. I step backward and wave at him as people are rushing into the train. But when the doors close, Randy is still there. It's okay, I'll take the next one. What's your age? No, playtime's over. I don't want to tell you how old I am, Randy. I don't know you. I don't even know how old you are. I'm 26, he said. You don't have to be ashamed of being really old. I don't mind with being older women, or younger. Even if you're 17, it's okay. At this point in my head, I'm just thinking, someone please help me. Wait a second. Specialized, obsessive interest. Oversharing his private information. No sense of personal boundaries or social graces. This can only mean one thing. The poor guy, I think. Maybe he doesn't know that what he's doing is socially unacceptable. This can be a learning moment. Well, I'll tell him. You know, Randy, many women don't like to be asked these types of questions by strangers on the subway. Oh yeah. I know you're not dangerous, but I think I know what your intentions are, and I don't like when men talk to me with sexual intentions. Randy looked like a deer in the headlights. I know that, he said sheepishly. People tell me that when I meet ladies, but I figured I should try. Sorry, try to do what? Try to tell me about your freaking foot fetish and expect me to help you fulfill your desires? Try to get me to have sex with you? No. Screw you. Nobody who approaches any stranger gets to do that. But I held my tongue. It was brave of you to try. I say with gritted teeth. But Randy, I don't appreciate being asked these questions. Oh, okay. He said. I'm going to go over to the southbound platform now, and you're going to stay here and get on the next train, alright? Yeah, okay, I guess. He mumbled and shuffled his feet. Goodbye, Randy. He perked up suddenly. Okay, it was nice to meet you, he chirped. Maybe we will run into each other someday. Fat chance, asshole. I'm thinking. I run up the escalator, but instead of going to the southbound platform, I head down the tunnel to the westbound and eastbound trains. All the while fuming that I have to further detour my trip home, just so I can get away from him. Lack of social cues can be damned. He knew he was being creepy and decided to keep doing it anyway, so he's a creep. So that's why when I looked over my shoulder and saw Randy running up the escalator after me, I booked it down the tunnel and ran to the first westbound train. I got off at the next stop and hid behind some trash cans for 15 minutes, before deciding it was finally safe. Guess I can't wear my favorite boots anymore. When I was around 7 years old, my parents would take me to a local grocery store and always ignore my complaints about how boring the trip was. Since there was nothing that caught my eye during these trips, I would always sit in those grocery carts and play with toys I brought from home, while my parents went to different aisles to gather all the groceries they needed. Obviously, it was not a smart idea to leave your 7-year-old alone in a grocery cart in the first place, but I was a very obedient child, and that part of town had a very peaceful and friendly atmosphere to it. Having my parents out of sight made me anxious at first, but I slowly grew accustomed to it once I realized that they would always come back to the cart after a few minutes. I just had to wait patiently. One day, my parents left me on the cart and didn't come back for quite a while. Now this would usually be the time when I would call, or, I guess in my case, loudly proclaim how hungry I am, for my parents to come back. But my parents bought me a Game Boy Advance a few days back, so I was too engrossed in whatever I was playing to even realize how many minutes passed. While I was waiting for my parents, a woman who I'd never seen before seemed to notice that I was left alone for a while and decided to approach the cart. She lightly tapped my shoulder to get my attention away from my game, which jolted me out of my trance. When I looked up at the woman, her face immediately formed into a huge grin, but I could tell it wasn't genuine. She began to ask random questions and tried to keep a conversation, but I refused to speak. I was a very shy child and always hated talking to adults who were not my parents. What's your name, sweetie? Silence. Aren't you bored sitting on that cart all alone? More silence. Where are your parents? Crickets. I've never felt like I was in danger while the lady was talking my ear off, because there have been many times when my friends of parents who live around the area would spot the cart I was in, wait with me, and also try to make small talk with me, which never really worked out, until one of my parents got back, which would lead to another very boring hour or so in the middle of the grocery store. Anyways, the woman eventually gave up making small talk and began to push the cart and said, "Why don't we look for your parents together?" Again, I didn't say anything, since I assumed they were one of the million friends that my mother or father had. We were near the market doors until I noticed my father inside an aisle carrying a bunch of items. I called out to him and said something along the lines of, "Dad, your friend wants to see you." When my dad looked up to where I was, his face paled when he saw the situation I was in and just dropped everything he had in his arms and tried to rush over to the cart, shouting my name. The woman at this point began freaking out and began to push the cart even faster. We were just out of the store and about halfway into the parking lot when she realized she couldn't outrun my dad if she kept on pushing the cart. In a complete panic, she let go of the cart and jumped into a car with a male driver before speeding off. It was obvious that she didn't give a shit about my safety. Now here I was at 7 years old in a shopping cart, screaming bloody murder as it rolled onto the street. I'm guessing there was a dent or something on the road because the cart then fell onto its side, which gave me massive scrapes and bruises to the left side of my body. Seconds later, I heard my dad swearing and quickly picking me up off the road, cradling me into his arms as I continued walking. Cops were called and my dad gave a statement. Unfortunately, he couldn't get the license plate of the car because he saw me fall onto the street and ran full force towards me, not even realizing the woman escaped with her companion. I had to get a few minor stitches and had a limp for a few days, but other than that, I was okay. Needless to say, my parents never took me on their boring grocery trips ever again. This story took place last night at a bar outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. In the defense of my quote-unquote male masculinity, I do want to make it known that I had consumed a couple of drinks the night this all went down. I'd met up with a couple of friends while at the bar and ended up heading out at about midnight with 4 of my female friends and 1 of my male friends. A couple walked out shortly behind us and stayed with us most of the way through the parking lot. We had just made it to our vehicle when we heard the 2 ladies behind us scream from across the parking lot. I instinctively turned to see what was going on, only to see 3 males surrounding the 2, attempting to grab hold of the lot. I said something along the lines of, "Screw that," looked to my pal and infamously said, "We are going." A little insight. My buddy and I work overseas security contracting, not the Blackwater stuff or super duper top secret operations, mostly celebrities, high profile weddings, and the occasional auction. Neither of us are small guys. Both of us are pretty close to 6'1" and about 200 pounds. So we rushed over the parking lot, making a whole lot of noise and screaming profanities, mainly trying to get Bubba and his 2 cousins to concentrate on us instead. My buddy had a whole lot less to drink than me, I won't lie. He did some work. A couple of physical exchanges between the 5 of us and the 3 boys were running off. The ladies were horrified but okay. We ended up calling our girlfriends an Uber and following the couple home. Bubba and his cousins followed us for a bit. Thankfully, a phone call to dispatch ended their pursuit and saw them arrested for DUI and assault. I just woke up and wanted to share this. Not as some heroic story or some BS like that, but as a reminder to take care of each other. We are not truly human if we do not. This list received a whole lot more attention than I expected. I do truly hope that this story will encourage others to stand up for your fellow women or woman. Thank you for all the support. Oh yeah, and the gentleman dubbed Bubba ended up having 3 prior charges against women. He's likely going away for a long time. Hi, I joined Reddit specifically to get this off my chest. It happened this time last year, and to this day every time I think about it, it gives me chills. So I want to start off by saying I still work for this company and I still have anxiety every time I go into work. The company is huge, one of the biggest names in the world. For privacy purposes, I'm going to call it the Big Cheese or Big C. I also want to mention that I have crippling social anxiety, which I credit to being homeschooled most of my life, and this will make more sense later. Well, in September of last year, I was fresh out of high school and looking for work. I needed this job immediately because I was living with my SO and we were barely getting by. My father and my grandfather, they both either work or worked for this company for a long period of time, and is something that garnered a lot of respect in the family. So of course, I was thrilled when I got my first interview. It went great and I was all set to start training, which involved a few classes and on-the-job training. The classes were awkward to say the least, but nonetheless informative. Well, after the classes, we had our first task: join a group of fellow trainees and tour the work environment. This is when I first met creepy coworker. He was in the very back of my group, seemed a little shy, and didn't really talk to the rest of the group unless he was trying to make an awkward joke to join in. At first, I kind of felt bad for him. He seemed harmless, but definitely awkward and out of the loop. Knowing as much as I did going into the company, I made the effort to inform him and keep him updated with what the trainers were asking of us. He just seemed so lost and confused. I thought I was doing a good thing by helping him out. Even my SO thought so at the time. The training went by without any hiccups, and soon we were given the location of where we would start out. Ironically enough, the only person that I'd gotten to know, creepy coworker, had the same area I did. Realizing that we would start out together and both didn't know anyone, we decided to exchange phone numbers. This was so that we could both meet up the next week, starting day so we couldn't get lost. I thought nothing of this when he asked for my number and just assumed it was more because he was nervous and didn't know anyone beside me. Boy, did I live to regret that. The first day of training, we met up at a basically flagpole so that we could wait for our on-the-job trainer, Christy. When he got off the employee shuttle, he started texting me asking where I was. I was in the smoking section a little ways away, killing my fears with a cigarette. I texted back telling him where I was, and he asked if he could join. I didn't like how nervous I felt, so I wasn't very comfortable with anybody joining me during this time of reprieve. But I saw him coming over anyway, so I scooted over to make some room on the bench. That didn't matter because apparently he was going to sit as close to me as possible anyway. I hate touch or people being in my personal bubble. Being a victim of other trauma, touch was something only people very close to me had permission to do. The creepy coworker then proceeded to ask me if he could bum a cigarette, and I'm not good at saying no, so I gave him one. After he lit up, he handed me my lighter that I didn't even notice he took from the top of my bag back to me. Again, I kind of just ignored the unwarranted invasion of my space. We talked since we had about 30 minutes to kill, like normal stuff, like how do you feel about the company or where do you want to end up in it. I noticed he was wearing tattoo covering sleeves, and so I asked him about his tattoos. He pulled down the sleeves and started going almost each and every one, all something to do with either a love interest or something geeky. I listened out of mild curiosity, but quickly got uncomfortable when he started pulling out his phone to show me pictures of ones he drew. I was uncomfortable because he kept showing me pictures of himself as well, mostly photos of him shirtless, and I didn't really find that appropriate. He mentioned he was a Marine and that he had gained too much weight after his last tour. I apologized out of sympathy, but suggested that it was nothing to be ashamed of. Unfortunately, after that, he kept smiling at me in a way I deemed to be admiration. I had seen this look from my fiance, so I knew somewhere I effed up. I quickly turned the conversation to more appropriate stuff like music taste. He seemed interested in what music I liked a little bit too much and decided he should make me a playlist. I said it wasn't really necessary, but he insisted. Later that very day during training, he kept purposely doing kind things, like taking heavy boxes from my hands or taking the odd jobs he deemed too grueling for a lady. I was a little bit annoyed, but mostly just glad most of the jobs meant that he'd have to go to a different area and give me some space. He'd always find a way back to appear beside me and scare me. I hate being scared, and he laughed it off every time. I was more than uncomfortable at this point, and a nervousness had settled in the pit of my stomach. At the end of the night, after we'd been sent to go home and come back the next day, he decided to walk me out. We would walk back through the maze my workplace actually is, all the way to the employee costume center and lockers. It was there that we had gotten our work costumes and stored our regular clothes in lockers. Well, I was having trouble remembering the combination, and I couldn't find the little slip of paper that told me it. The creepy coworker came up and smiled at me, seemingly waiting for me to finish up. I thought he left by this point, so I wasn't expecting him to be there. After a few tries, he reached over and put in the combination of my lock for me. This was a serious red flag for me. He had already memorized my combination, and now I felt as though my privacy was completely gone. Again, I'm awkward and unsure what to do in any situation like this, so I thanked him, but suggested that he let me figure it out next time. I was hoping he would so that he would forget my combination. Remember this for later. After changing back into my regular clothes in the girls' locker room, I came out and he was still waiting there. I asked him why he had waited when he could have just gotten home sooner, to which he replied, "Because I'm a gentleman and a lady should be walked to her car so she can be kept safe." I told him my SO was waiting to pick me up. He asked where, and I told him down the street like an idiot. I still don't know why I complied with this creep as much as I did, but I'd never been in a situation like this one. He told me that was too far for me to walk alone and that it wasn't safe, so he offered to drive me over to my SO's car. Due to how tired I was and how much I ached from the day, I just didn't have the strength to argue. I mean, he was creepy but nice. I chalked up the creepiness to him just being awkward. So without anything else weird happening, he took me to my SO, whom I had been texting the entire time, just to let him know where I was and what was going on. I had a deep gut feeling that I should text him everything I knew about the guy, so I did. When we pulled up, I immediately got out of the car. My boyfriend sat there leaning against the car with his arms crossed. He wasn't very happy about him giving me a ride, but nonetheless, he thanked the creepy coworker for getting me over to him safely. The coworker nodded, seeming to smile at my boyfriend the whole time. This was when my boyfriend first got a bad feeling about him. So we got home and my boyfriend warned me about the guy, telling me he wasn't getting a good vibe from the creepy coworker. It wasn't even 3 minutes after that I got a text from him. He started sending me songs and memes and telling me things like, "I feel like you really get me." Now I was deeply concerned. What the heck did I get myself into? Why did I have to be so damn nice to people? The following day at work, I was on the last day of training and I had a massive panic attack. I have a chronic illness and the situation ended with none of my managers listening to me when I told them that the pain doesn't last and comes and goes. They proceeded to rush me to the emergency room. A stretcher carried me through work while I was crying and trying to hide my face. The customers were quick to take out their phones and film the whole thing. It was one of the worst experiences of my life, but what happens next is even worse. I received about 20 texts from creepy coworker asking me how I was. At this point I was done. I just didn't respond. After a few random memes, he started texting me that he was drunk and thinking about not going home to his wife. This was the first time he'd ever mentioned to me he even had a wife. I was dumbfounded. Why was he so concerned about me when he had somebody he obviously loved enough to marry? I didn't respond. I went to bed. In the morning, I woke up to my boyfriend looking at my phone in anger. My heart sank, and I could only imagine what creepy coworker had sent now. My boyfriend showed me the only text I had gotten since the night before. It was from his wife texting me from his phone. She wrote me a message explaining that creepy coworker had a problem getting attached to women. She warned me that I should stay away from him and then told me her name. My name. It was after she had explained my name was a thing for him, all of his exes had the same name. Now at this point, my boyfriend was telling me not to go back to this job, that it isn't worth it. But that's not me. I wasn't going to let one creep ruin this opportunity for me. This job meant the world to me and I never wanted to let it go, so I told him if this continues, I'll go to HR. But in all honesty, I didn't even want to do that. I was the new girl. I didn't want the first month on the job to me be fighting a harassment case. Biting my nails the whole way I went to work. Suddenly, creepy coworker wasn't hovering anymore. I thought this might have been him being embarrassed. I was pretty convinced I wasn't going to have a problem after that. On my lunch break, he made sure to go on his lunch early and come find me. His normally enthusiastic attitude was gone, replaced by what felt like anger. I was scared. He came up to me and let me know that his wife was full of shit and just angry because he was divorcing her. At this point, I didn't want anything to do with him, so I kept quiet, hoping he would take the hint. Nope. He told me he had a gift for me and that he'd give it to me after that shift, quickly walking away before I could respond. After my shift, I go outside the work area to the lockers. I had waited an extra hour and a half, even taking a closing position from a coworker just so he'd go home before me. Well, my lock wasn't locked all the way and I was now freaked out. I opened the locker to grab my bag and go, but noticed it. A rolled up piece of drawing paper. I know what kind it was because I myself am an artist. Unrolling it was a naked girl. Suddenly, he walks up even though he should be long gone by then and confronts me. He asked me if I liked it, and because he seemed angry I said yes. I suggested he not do it anymore though, as my boyfriend wouldn't like this kind of gift at all. He rolled his eyes and playfully giggled at me like I was joking with him. But I wasn't. Not only did he follow me the whole way out of the work grounds, but he also got on the employee shuttle that I got on to have witnesses. He sat right next to me, leaning on me. I felt like a deer in headlights, mentally begging somebody to suggest that he shouldn't be that close to me. Nobody paid any attention. Instead, I spent the whole drive trying to get this man to pull his arm off of my shoulders. I felt nauseated and my head was spinning. After we got off, I practically dashed off the bus and ran to my boyfriend, who parked the car at the entrance to the employee parking zone. I got in the car and told him to go. He took off and I started crying. I told my boyfriend and he was pissed. He wanted to turn around and punch creepy coworker, but I talked him out of it through tears. I promised that I would talk to my managers after that. Well, I kept looking for the right time to pull a manager aside, but never got a chance the next night I went in. Now, creepy coworker's attitude did another 180, and he was being extremely weirdly playful. Then he crossed the final line. He grabbed my butt where customers could easily see him. My coworkers kind of laughed and thought it was a game. Because this time I was pissed and pushed to my limit, I went after him. I legitimately punched him in the ass and shouted in his face. "How do you like that, huh?" Seething, he seemed unfazed by my anger. Instead, he laughed it off and winked at me. I went down into the basement for the employee bathroom and quickly threw up the contents of my stomach, crying in the stall, also praying that this would stop. I quickly made an excuse, used my chronic illness, and went home. So fast forward a few weeks, he had completely swapped out his shifts so he wouldn't work with me. I felt like I had won the battle. I sent a message and he realized he'd crossed boundaries, until the night before Christmas Eve. I had a terrible feeling as my boyfriend was driving me to work that night. I felt gross. I got to work and he was there, flirting with other girls, suddenly having this big ego I had never seen him display before. Like I said, when I met him, he was shy and awkward. It's like his personality flipped every time I had to see him. I never knew which side of him I was going to get. That night, he actually stomped off as all the other coworkers, including myself, closed the joint. We were scrubbing like normal and he didn't seem all together. So he clocked out early and I relaxed. I figured he had gotten in trouble since one of our 4 managers seemed to be upset that he clocked out without permission. I was there extra late. The evening festivities were done with for the night and my zone was pretty much closed off from customers. So I walked through the massive property that is my work to get to the street. I had started taking new ways to meet my boyfriend who picked me up, just so I wouldn't be followed. This time I was going to walk straight out of the grounds and onto the street where the bus stops were, and my boyfriend would be waiting at the curb. I was about halfway through my approximately 12-minute walk and I was in a dark area. Out of nowhere, as I'm sure you've already guessed, the creepy coworker shows up. He starts yelling my name and following me from behind. I pretended not to notice and walked faster. He yells my name again and seems angrier, so I sprint for it. I sprint all the way to cross the shuttle zone and end up crashing into someone's chest. Thankfully, it was actually my boyfriend who had a really bad feeling and wanted to be as close to my work exit as possible. I looked back and creepy coworker got on a shuttle, but was staring from the window, smiling like a Cheshire cat the whole time. Never in my life had I been so terrified. After that, the next night was Christmas Eve and I was supposed to work. But I just knew if I went in, something bad was going to happen to me. So crying the whole time because I knew I had earned a bunch of points for calling out to avoid him. I cried, asking the lady on the phone if I was going to get fired, and she said she honestly couldn't say. I respected that, but I knew I wasn't done. I wasn't going to let this creep make me lose the job I had worked so hard to get, even changing my appearance to fit their strict standards. No, so I wrote to the only person I could think of, my trainer, Christy. She was a lead and she is the kindest girl you'd ever meet. Heart of gold. You just knew being her friend meant that you'd have a trusted confidant for life. I told her everything, sent her the screenshots of the text sent to me. Finally told somebody with an ounce of leadership that I was scared to go to work. Immediately, she responded and asked if she could tell the managers, and even though I was incredibly nervous, I told her yes. The next day, I was pulled in, and I'm thankful for my ex-manager, Christopher, because he was shocked at everything that had happened to me and quickly helped me write a report for HR. He led me through the steps and even changed the schedule so I wouldn't work with creepy coworker unless he specifically traded shifts. 2 months go by. I am well acquainted with the responsibilities for my work at this point and I'm comfortable, but of course, there's no stopping a stalker. He had traded a shift and was working the night shift with me. He was angry every time he looked at me and I avoided him at all costs. Then around halfway through my shift, I'm down in the basement coming back from the restroom. I'm walking up the steps that lead back to my work area and then I feel somebody behind me. Before I could think a clear thought, I was pushed against the wall and beside my head. He leans in and said, "You should smile more." Then the bastard chuckles and walks away. I feel pretty hysterical at this point and run to the closest leader, crying and trying to explain what happened. It was at this point that my manager Christopher, pissed off that HR was taking so long to investigate my case, went to speed it up. Well, after 4 months of an interview process with HR, finally the case was resolved. Not only was he let go, but I was doing really well in my job finally. Nothing to worry me into not paying attention to my duties. Creepy coworker has left me alone ever since, but sometimes I get random friend requests from guys with no pictures and always similar names, always close to his. So, please leave me alone or you won't like the results. I won't be intimidated ever again by you, and I will win every battle you throw at me. Let's not meet ever again. In the fall of 2010, I decided to go back to college. I was a single mom of 3 boys, but they were all in school now, and me going back was finally possible. The school I went to is a regional campus of a very large university and is located in a neighborhood that is known for crime, meth, heroin, prostitution, etc. But it was only a 20-minute drive from my home and I didn't feel unsafe about going there. The first day and first class were intimidating. I didn't know anybody and I was a lot older than most students. I was 28 at the time. I sat down in the back of the room at a table, and a few minutes later, a lady who was around my age sat down next to me. She was very skinny, smelled like cigarettes, had greasy hair and sunken eyes, but she started to talk to me and seemed normal enough. She started off the conversation telling me that she chose to sit next to me because I was wearing the prettiest blouse in the room. Strange, but as an awkward person, I leave a lot of leeway for people to say or do awkward things before I think too deeply into things. She didn't have a backpack, any books, a pen, or a notebook. Nothing. She said her financial aid hadn't come through yet, but she didn't want to fall behind on classes and asked if she could share my book. I agreed and gave her a pen and paper also. After the first class, she asked if I would mind going to the library with her so she could scan some of the pages to take me home. I agreed and we started to head to the library. She stops and looks at her phone and says her son just texted and needs her to come home to do something. She asks if I will come with her. I tell her I have another class shortly and I can't. Then I ask if she still wants to go to the library first. She says no, that she has to get her son but really can't go alone. I keep telling her I can't go with her and she starts crying. At this point, we were in a common area outside and the parking lot was to one side and the library to the other. I tell her I need to go to the library and she's welcome to come, talk or whatever she needs, but I have to go. I didn't like being outside away from people with this woman anymore and I was trying to get back to a busier area. She gets really upset, starts screaming, and basically says F you to me. She may have actually said that. I can't remember how the interaction went exactly because I was frozen in confusion by how quickly she transitioned from friendly to crying and scared and to now screaming in my face a slew of hateful, angry things. I turn around to start walking to the library and call my friends so that I would have somebody aware if this lady tried anything more than just screaming. I get to the library vestibule and watch her through the glass doors. She is standing in the parking lot, and then a car pulls up with a man in it and is obviously upset with the woman. They are arguing, but I can't hear them from inside the vestibule. Eventually, she gets in the car and leaves with them. The next day, I was dreading class because I didn't know what this woman's attitude would be that day. But she wasn't there the next day. In the end, she never came back to class. I didn't know her name or, at the time, how to look at a class roster. But looking back, I'm fairly certain she was not enrolled at the school at all, and for whatever reason, was trying to get me to leave with her. I wish I knew her intentions. At the same time, I'm glad I never had to find out. For 6 months last year, I lived in the north of Spain. About a week before I was going to move back to Ireland, my friends and I were at my house having dinner and drinking a little bit. I was renting an apartment in the city, and my roommate was an older lady, maybe in her 50s. I'm 20. That night, my roommate left to go have dinner with her friends. About a minute after she left, somebody buzzed our door to be let into the building. I looked at the camera and didn't recognize the woman. She looked to be in her late 20s to early 30s, so I just assumed it was one of my roommate's friends and she was coming to meet her or something like that. I buzzed her into the building, assuming they would be in the lobby. At first, I didn't buzz her in because I didn't recognize her and she walked away from the door. But then I hit the buzzer as soon as she walked away, and then I myself walked away from the camera, meaning I couldn't see if she actually entered or not. Assuming that if she didn't enter, she would just call or text my roommate. Boy, was I wrong. This woman came up to my apartment building on the 6th floor. She came up just 2 minutes after my roommate left, so I know she didn't take the stairs, and I know they must have seen each other when my roommate got off the lift and the lady got in. Realizing that this is weird, I do not open the door when she rings it. I look through the peephole just to confirm that it was nobody I knew. At this point, I back away from the door and gesture for my friend to be silent. We creep back to my room, which is at the far side of the apartment, and I begin calling my roommate who wasn't picking up. Meanwhile, the lady is incessantly ringing my doorbell. My roommate is not picking up, and my friend is just telling me to open my door. In her mind, it's a woman, so she must be harmless. I tell her that she's an idiot for underestimating the female sex. Women can be criminals too. She keeps telling me to open the door and I refuse. The doorbell keeps ringing and I keep looking out the peephole. At this point, I understand that if she knew my roommate or were looking for somebody specific, she would just call or text them. But she didn't take out a phone at all. She just stayed eerily quiet, didn't call out any names or ask if anybody was home. This was weird to me. I finally get through to my roommate. She said that she wasn't expecting anybody and that she doesn't know anyone in that age range. Then she asked if I'm okay and I say I'm fine. Now it's been at least 20 minutes. I know the lady knows somebody is home because the lights are on and my understanding is that's why she's not leaving. I continue watching her through the peephole and see her go into the lift for a minute and then come back out again. The lift is really loud and I would have heard it move. It didn't. She just went in and came out. In my mind, this means somebody is in the lift waiting for her. That screams sketchy to me. After about 40 minutes, she leaves. I run to our hall and flick on the outside camera. The lady left the building with 2 men. They all had backpacks on. I will be eternally grateful for trusting my instincts and not listening to my friend. Sometimes it's better to be safe than sorry. This literally just happened. For context, I'm a tiny 4'10", 160-pound lady. I'm a mom and I personally have quite a few years of working with or interacting with unsavory characters who are sometimes violent. So to say, I actually work best under pressure. I also have had really bad social anxiety, so I'm always on high alert. So I roll up to Walmart, my husband's grandma watching the baby at home, because I need to grab some things for the baby. I get my car and go about my business with collecting of diapers, wipes, and a new pack of pacifiers, etc. After my serious shopping ends, I wander to the female aisle where hygiene products for ladies are kept. I see a very awkward looking gal looking at boxes of pads. She can't be much older than 10 and her sweats and tea give her away. I casually step over holding a box with fun designs on it. I say, "Here, try these. See this big word? It means you won't be allergic. No matter what, and that's kind of important." Her shy red face lightens up with a little smile and she says, "Thanks, miss," before darting off to tell a lady in nice clothes. I'm talking like a woman's suit dress nice. Important later. You're at the shampoo that a nice lady over there helped me find some of the hyperallergenic ones. I waved at the curious mom who smiled and waved back. As the daughter and mom go off on their own, I notice a weirdly twitchy, ungroomed man following them. I think nothing of it as, who am I to judge relationships? Except if that was mom's boyfriend, this post wouldn't be here, would it? I'm getting ready to leave after looking for a toy for my son when I spot none other than the shy girl who has a scrunched up, angry, sad kid face. I'm about to speak when I fully round the corner and see Twitchy holding Shy Girl by the wrist, hard enough I can see the red mark forming from the other side of the aisle. I don't see Mom, and it hits me that this is not the mom's boyfriend, and Shy Girl is in danger. I dart over there and snatch her over to me, screaming in this dude's face. "Do you know this girl? What's her name? Where's her mom?" The problem is, Twitchy got answers. I'm drawing a small gathering of onlookers now, and Twitchy is visibly more twitchy. He says, "I'm her uncle, damn it. Now give her here," and he reached for her. I toss her behind me and, on full autopilot, ready to fight, scream even louder, describe what her mother is wearing then. He freezes and starts muttering. After regaining his confidence, he hollers back with blue jeans and a shirt just like every other normal person. The crowd seems satisfied, and a few wander off thinking this is a mistake. But the girl is crying as this guy is physically touching my chest with his, trying to get to her. I yell at the top of my lungs, "You are a liar and a pedophile." He screams, "No, I'm her guardian." Then, just as it came from heaven, I heard a shaking, angry but calm mom's tone say, "The problem with that is I'm her mom and I've never met you before." Mom to the rescue. I shit you not, my mouth flew open watching this beige-clad businesswoman swoop in like a gallant angel to rescue her offspring. Her finger in his face, she backs him down like the savage animal mothers can be. I could hear the deranged mom snarl from 8 feet away, clasping tightly to a child sobbing in relief, thanking me and praising her mom. The woman berated this man verbally and security chased him out of the store. Sadly, he wasn't alone, so I was told and made an exit. I gave the mom my number when she came back to thank me and collect her daughter. If that woman had anything, through her tears, she tried to give it to me. I told her the truth. "I have a little boy, ma'am, and all I'd like to do is get home to him." She seemed to wholesomely understand. I didn't actually end up buying anything, and my cart is probably still chilling in the toy aisle. I'll send my husband later. Now I'm going to go home and hold my son for a while. Okay, so a little backstory first. I lived in Thailand from ages 13 to 17 as a missionary kid. My parents never really let me travel by myself unless it was necessary. We didn't have a car or anything, so I would use public transportation. Being a young blonde, white girl in Bangkok, Thailand, where sex trafficking is very prominent, I usually wasn't traveling by myself anyway. On this particular occasion, I was out at a mall with some friends and was going home. It was around dusk, so I was going to take a taxi. I've taken taxis before and haven't had any weird experiences until this time. When I get in, the guy is asking me questions like, "Where are you from?" or "What do your parents do?" They usually ask these questions, or sorts of things, because I speak the language a bit and they are cautious like anyone else would be. But this guy starts asking me very personal questions like, "How old are you? Do you have a boyfriend? Are your parents home?" I immediately started to get uncomfortable. I give him a false name and age and say that my parents were home. This is not where it stops. He continues to ask questions, now smiling creepily at me in the rearview mirror. I start to ignore him and just look out the window. After a minute of silence, he starts to hum. Not just humming to himself, but staring at me from the mirror. I wait a couple of minutes and have my phone in my hands ready to call somebody if he makes a different turn. I know most of the paths to my house, so I would know if he was taking the wrong one. I also start memorizing his taxi number, color, and what his face looked like. He eventually starts full-on singing to me a slow song that I could not understand. I finally call my parents and just say to stay on the phone with me. The guy realizes I'm on the phone and stops immediately and doesn't look at me for the rest of the trip. I told him to drop me off a block away from my house, just so he wouldn't know where I lived. I've never gotten out of the cab so fast. I realized he could have been harmless and not intending to be creepy with his singing to me, but it was weird and I wasn't going to take any chances. I've had one other creepy encounter with a taxi since that time, but that story is for another post. This happened when I was about 8. For reference, I'm female. I grew up in an apartment complex with about 20 buildings, each around 25 floors high. Each floor had 4 apartments, which made about 200 apartments in all. Each building had a car park underneath with an elevator and a flight of stairs that went from the car park to the roof. My apartment was on the 5th floor of an apartment building right in the middle of the complex. I used to take the bus home from school and it would drop me off at the corner across from the complex. I would cross the road and walk home. One day I'd gotten off the bus and crossed the road when I saw that some neighborhood kids had drawn a hopscotch on the footpath outside the complex. I loved hopscotch, so I dropped my bag and started playing. On my second go, a lady who looked like she was in her mid-20s came over and asked if she could play. I was naturally a shy little girl, but I was also very polite, especially to adults. I gave her my stone and let her have a go. Once she had a go, she asked if her friends could play. 3 guys, all in their mid to late 20s, came over. This freaked me out. As I said, I was very shy, especially of men. I was aware that I was alone with them and I felt uncomfortable. I told the lady that they could play, but I had to go home. She gave me a sad look and said that she hoped we would be good friends. I didn't want to hurt her feelings, but I was pretty scared, so I lied and told her I would take my school bag home and come back. I picked up my bag and hightailed it out of there. I got home and thought that would be the end of it. I was scared of getting in trouble from my parents for talking to strangers, so I didn't tell them. The next day, the lady was waiting for me at the gates to the complex. She said that she was very sad that I didn't come back and that it hurt her feelings. I said I was sorry, but that my mom had made me do my homework. She asked if we could play now. I looked around and saw her friends waiting by a van. She said they wanted to take me to have ice cream at Kiki's, which was a new ice cream place that had just opened. Each ice cream came with a toy, and all my friends at school had at least 2 toys each. We couldn't afford to go there, so I'd always felt left out. Now this lady was offering to take me. I knew I shouldn't go with her, so I said thank you, but I couldn't play today. She got really angry and said I had to go with her. Being a timid kid, I hated being yelled at, so this freaked me right out and I started to cry. The lady immediately said she was sorry and gave me a hug. Then she tried to lead me to the van, saying an ice cream to make it all better. I pulled away and started to run home. This time they followed me. I could hear them running after me and I knew they were faster than me, so I figured I'd hide from them. I flew into the underground car park of the building closest to the gate and hid between the 2 cars. I heard them run down the ramp and stop. Then I heard the lady call out to me. "Do you like hide and seek? Let's play. Ready? We're coming to get you." I was shivering violently and knew that they would find me here. I decided I'd get to the elevator shaft, take the elevator up to the top, then run down the stairs a few floors and take it back down, thinking they would see the elevator stop on the top floor and assume I was hiding there, so they would search while I got away. The elevator was on the other side of the car park. I had to go around 2 corners to get there. I crept along the wall, staying as low as I could, until I was around the corner, and then I bolted for the elevator. The elevator was in a small room that had a huge door. I got inside but didn't close the door all the way. I pressed the button and watched as the elevator slowly descended, stopping at nearly every floor. I crept over to the door and peeked out through the crack to see where they were. I spotted them just as I heard the elevator being from behind me. Without thinking, I closed the door. Now, as I said before, the door was huge, so it made a huge noise as it closed, and even as I ran into the elevator, I knew they would know where I was. The elevator was full of people, and I squeezed right to the back, hiding behind 2 boys and a girl who I'd seen around before. The girl lived in my building, but on a different floor. I watched the elevator doors closing, praying that they would hurry up. Just before they closed, a hand shot between them and they opened again. The woman was there, looking furious. "Get out here," she yelled. An elderly woman asked what the matter was, and the woman said I was her daughter and I'd run away. I was too scared to speak as the woman grabbed my arm and tried to drag me out. One of the boys sensed something was wrong and stopped her. He asked if I knew her, and I shook my head and started to cry. The girl from my building picked me up while the boy told the woman to leave me alone. Since the elevator was full of people who now realized what was happening, the woman and guys disappeared. The girl from my building and the 2 guys walked me home and told my parents what had happened. The police were called, and after some investigating, I wasn't told this until years later, found that the woman and the men were child traffickers. I'm so grateful that the boy realized something was off and stepped in. Who knows where I would be if he hadn't. This is going to be short, but the memory sprung into my mind a couple days back, and I thought it would be worth sharing. I live in North Wales, UK. For anybody who has had the pleasure of visiting, it is truly a beautiful place to live. Though, for an adolescent boy, it is certainly lacking in things to do. As a result, my friends and I would often find ourselves mindlessly exploring areas of countryside and coastline. Despite it being quite sparsely populated in comparison to the closest cities, there is a dual carriageway running right along the coast from Wales into England. Also, train tracks run alongside this road for most of its course, occasionally passing overhead via a small cement bridge. Anyway, there was one night a few years ago when about 4 of us randomly decided to try and explore the inside of one of these bridges, as one of the group had observed a manhole cover nearby, which we believed to be the entrance. On closer inspection, we discovered that several tools would be required in order to gain entry. We returned with the necessary equipment and proceeded to unbolt the cover. This had to be done stealthily, as the train track was right beside us, not close enough to be of any danger, but definitely a sufficiently small distance to cause panic for any train driver, and panic usually means police. It wasn't long before we had removed the heavy steel disc and had started descending the ladder down to the structure. Once we had all safely reached the bottom, we decided to progress to the other side. At this point, we are totally confined to the narrow space that leads into the main area. If you are confused as to what the heck this bridge is supposed to be, you probably should be, because it was rather peculiar. I mean, I would have never known there was even an inside had we not found the manhole. So, as we squeeze and crouch and at one point scrape along our bellies to the other side of the structure, there is a growing sense of claustrophobia between us. The distance from one end to the other is surprisingly long, but by the halfway point, you can look down through the narrow gaps onto the motorway below. This was actually pretty cool, which helped keep us calm in a strange way. At this point, apart from the mild discomfort and confinement, we were still just a group of guys on an adventure. But that was about to change dramatically. No more than a few meters beyond halfway, which we could tell due to the symmetry of the passageways through the bridge, one of us claimed that they could see some object in the distance at the far end. Slightly hesitantly, we agreed to investigate. Bad move. I reached the end first, and let me tell you, I have never felt the same sense of dread before or since. In front of me was a single fold-away chair positioned facing a wall. On the wall was a partially torn page from a newspaper or a magazine, showing a fully naked lady in erotic position. The reason I don't just refer to it as porn is because something was different about it. I can't put my finger on it, but it seemed more sinister, if that makes any sense. More disturbingly, the eyes of the woman on display had been cut from the page, removed with precision, not just hastily ripped off. The scene that lay before us had rendered us completely speechless, and an overpowering sense of panic could be felt collectively. That was when we found the condom. The horrendous, gut-wrenching, blood-drenched condom. Needless to say, we got the heck out of there as fast as humanly possible, smashing our knees and chins against the sharp cement edges that lined the path to the ladder by which we had entered. Of course, we were all praying that the manhole hadn't been resealed, and it was impossible to tell until you reached the ladder itself. Thankfully, the exit route was clear, and we promptly dashed as far away as our legs could carry us. I'm sure this ending comes as a disappointment to some of you reading or listening to this, as we luckily never bumped into the twisted individual who sits in that chair, but I must stress how radically out of the norm it was given where I live. The reason I mentioned the population earlier was with purpose, because there are easily enough people here to escape the realms of crazy country folk, yet nowhere near enough people to have somebody clearly lose grip on society without somebody taking notice. For example, there was literally only one homeless man who everybody in the area knew and grew fond of, eventually resulting in a mass gathering at his funeral when he passed away. I sometimes think, though, not recently, as I had more or less forgotten about that night entirely, about the person who climbs down into that bridge and navigates through the darkness to sit facing a wall and do who knows what that ends up with a condom full of blood. You honestly couldn't envision a more surreal situation. It has come to my realization that what we unearthed that night has not once been uttered to another soul. As a naive teenager, it was the type of thing you just want to forget, but thinking about it, we probably should have let the police, or at least somebody, know what was down there, because it wasn't the doings of a healthy-minded individual. So there you have it. Apologies for the length. I got a little bit carried away, as it was my first post here, and I wanted to make the reading experience as similar to the reality as I could. Now I'm a few years older and hopefully a bit braver. I'm considering going down there again, accompanied of course, to see what messed up shit might be waiting. This could well happen in the next couple of days, and rest assured, I will 100% post an update, as I currently have no job, so time is plentiful. Thanks for listening. This is my first time posting here, but I have been following this subreddit for a while now. The year is 2003, I'm a 15-year-old boy and living in a small city. This is a place where everybody seems to know everyone. I am typically shy and often use the internet as a way to meet people. During this time, the instant messenger ICQ was still pretty popular amongst the teens in my area. I would often stay up late adding new people and chatting them up. I would do this by searching the city and adding people I knew from school. This is how I met her. Her name was Sarah. We began chatting innocently enough. The normal hey what's up sort of deal. Now, Sarah was a self-described 17-year-old girl. Short, brown hair and nerdy. We hit it off pretty fast. We had so much in common and I found it easy to open up. Although, I thought it was strange that I'd never seen her in school. I go to the Christian school, explaining why I never see her. We continue chatting for some time and I eventually give her my home phone number. We chat regularly over the phone until eventually she asked, "Would you like to hang out sometime?" Without hesitation, we make plans for me to go over to her house, hang out and watch movies. The day finally comes for us to hang out. I make my way across the town to the address she gave me. It's a small apartment building. Slightly confused on how she and the rest of her family would fit in such a small apartment, I make my way up the stairs. I knock and I am immediately greeted at the door by a woman, maybe in her late 20s or even early 30s. I knew this was Sarah, but she didn't look anything like she described. I was instantly weirded out, but followed her into her small one-bedroom apartment. I stupidly asked, "So, are your parents home?" She laughed. "No, it's just me here." I'm now awkwardly sitting on the couch. "Do you drink?" She's looking at me across the room. "Yeah, water," I joke. We both share an awkward laugh as she pours me a glass of wine. I never take a sip of it. She sits close to me after popping in a bootleg copy of Finding Nemo. "My brother got this for me while it was still in theaters. He's like a hacker or something." She laughs. At this point, she is very close to me and I'm uncomfortable, and being the weirdo I am, I shift to the floor. I'm now sitting on the floor with my back up against the couch. She then straddles me from behind. "You look so tense." She begins rubbing my back. "I'm really good at this. I can make you feel so good," she said. I lean forward. "Yeah, thanks, but you don't need to do that. I'm fine." I explain I should be going and she points to her bedroom. You can stay the night. I've never had a guy stay in my bed. She keeps making these advances, telling me how she hasn't done it in so long and she just wants to meet a nice guy like me. All the while she keeps touching my arms and face. Now at this point in my life, I was still a virgin, but this lady was not going to be the one to change that. I talked my way out of this situation and head home. The next few days I get several messages telling me she misses me and she's sorry. Eventually I cave and respond to one of her messages. I ask her why she lied and what her deal is. She tells me she has a hard time meeting friends and that she doesn't like people her own age. I feel bad for her, forgive her, and we make plans to talk in person. Here I am at my last encounter with Sarah. I ride my bike to her apartment. Once inside, I am greeted not only by her, but her parents too. They introduce themselves. Finally, we get to meet Sarah's boyfriend. Her dad jokes, "We've heard so much about you. She's always going on about how great you are." Her mom follows up. In my head, I'm freaking out. I am not this girl's boyfriend. Sarah grabs my hand and laces our fingers together. She looks so happy. Her parents were just stopping over to pick something up and were actually on their way out the door when I showed up. If I were going to get out of here, now would be the chance. I grabbed the box her mom was about to pick up. "I'll take that down for you," her mom smiles. "You're a keeper." I help her parents load the box in their SUV and hop on my bike. I was just swinging by to say hi. I should probably get home. Sarah wraps her arms around me and kisses my cheek. Ride home confused and plan on never talking to that girl again. She dropped me a few more messages I never responded to. Even called the landline a few times, but we never spoke. I don't know what ever happened to her. I don't know why her parents didn't question my age or if they were just okay with it. This story happened about 4 years ago, spanning from the end of my grade 10 year to halfway through my grade 11. I was in the band room of my school where my friends and I liked to hang out and eat our lunches since we were all friends with the band teacher. But one day there were a few new people there. One of them was Tim. Tim was in grade 12, I was in grade 10, and we hit it off immediately. It was like we were almost the same person. Interests, hobbies, activities, etc. I didn't see it at the time, but he was basing all of his likes off of mine. We exchanged information like Snapchat, Discord, a phone number, the whole lot, and we spent a lot of time talking. This is where things started to go downhill. I was talking to him, and at this point we had known each other for about a week and some change. He says to me that he's in the hospital and that he's really sorry. As soon as I saw this, I started crying. While he was in the hospital for the week and a half he was there, he kept trying to get me to come see him while using the classic, trying to manipulate me to come. I, however, could not want to go as the mental health recovery unit where I live has a strict family-only policy for the patient's safety. I explicitly told him that I could not see him, and he kept trying to manipulate me into doing so anyways. A few weeks later, just after school ended and Tim and I had been talking for a while, I got a message from this girl named Sarah in my Instagram DM saying things like, "How dare you flirt with my boyfriend?" or "Why did you come on to him when he has a girlfriend?" and things like that. I don't remember exactly as I wanted to block this whole period of time out. After a while of explaining and telling her I did not know he had a girlfriend, she explained to me that he'd done this thing before and to just stop talking to him. Also, he did the same thing to her. She's so far trapped in an abusive relationship she can't get out. His MO, per se, was preying on young naive girls for mental validation, all while making them feel horrible for not doing things for him. Before Sarah came to me, there were red flags and sirens going off in my head, but I chose to ignore them since I didn't and still don't like breaking things off with people without a good reason. When he invited me out, I'd make an excuse since my gut told me to run. But I didn't run, at least not before Sarah. After the explanation, I quickly started ghosting Tim. It was pretty simple since we didn't actually have any overlapping activities or hobbies, so all I had to do was block him on social media and block his number. Fast forward to the end of November of my grade 11 year, I've forgotten all about Tim and tried my hardest to push what he did out of my brain. Guess who pops up in the only social media DM I forgot to block him on, but Tim himself. And me being the trusting person I was, saw nothing wrong with it. Maybe he had changed. Maybe he was a different boy now. He told me he was off for Christmas break the week after and wondered if I wanted to go to a frat party with them. Now the flags are really rising and I say, sure, why not? Then text Sarah about what's happening. During this hiatus from Tim, Sarah and I built quite a close friendship. She says she didn't even know he was coming back and that he told her that he was going to Cancun with his family for the holiday season, leaving on December 5th, but that she's away at her father's place for about 45 minutes out of town for the week of the party and to do as I see fit. I wanted to have fun, so I went to this party. I was easily the youngest person in the whole party. As I was only 16 at the time, I didn't feel comfortable drinking at a place other than my home, so I chose not to. Tim, however, does drink. Once he was drunk enough for his liking, we got up to go, and I know where I live pretty well. Not a big city, but not a small one either, and we went down a street I had never been down before. Again, red flags were going off, and I was tense and jumpy. There was nobody on the street and no lights on in the houses. Tim then plants himself in front of me and tries to kiss me. I, being 16, have never even kissed anyone before, didn't take well to this. Luckily at the time, my mom was making me take a ladies' self-defense course, so I punched him in the eye, kicked his groin, and booked it. Some people might say that this was an overreaction, but I had been sexually harassed before and didn't want to take my chances with a drunk guy, even when I knew. I bus it home from downtown, and when I get home, it's a little after 10:30 at night. I didn't tell my mom since I was scared she'd get mad at me for being at a party. I was irrational and in hindsight probably should have told her. I immediately text Sarah to tell her what happened, and she doesn't reply until the next morning. From what she said, he texted her all sweet-like, and she gave him the address of her dad's place, where she was staying while he was on a business trip. He got there still drunk and pissed off, hit her a few times, and verbally abused her until she had to leave and go to her mother's house. I tell Sarah that I'm sorry for what happened and hope it never happens again, but I cannot keep talking to her unless I want Tim in my life, which I don't. Back to today, and Sarah is still with Tim, and I see her around sometimes with a black eye one day or a swollen cheek the next. To this day, I have trust issues with guys, and it is extremely hard for me to form romantic relationships for fear that this will happen again. Before cutting off contact with Sarah, I did offer help, and she said that other friends did too, but she didn't want people tied up in her mess. I still say hi every once in a while, maybe once a year just to catch up, but that's it. This will be a bit short, but completely true. I grew up in a small town in British Columbia, Canada, around 7,000 people with my mom. The town I grew up in is a small area above the border and is heavily wooded on the outskirts of the city. We lived in my grandma's house until my mom could afford to get her own place around the age of 7. I remember one night the phone rang. I answered and said hello, to which I didn't hear anything, so I hung up. Then another ring. This time when I answered it, I could hear creepy giggling on the other end, which creeped the heck out of me. I gave the phone to my mom and she told me to go downstairs. Every so often, a few years, this would happen. The giggling and random calls with nobody on the other end, and I would usually forget about it. By the time I was 10, we had moved to a few different places in town, and I can't remember if it happened or not for a while, so I'm assuming it didn't. One night I was watching TV before bed and the phone rang. I answered to someone on the other end, saying my name in a weird whisper, and ran crying to my mom. She answered, and I can remember her saying, "Okay, you need to stop this." I can't quite remember what happened after. All I can remember is going to sleep. That night, I woke up to tapping on my window. I remember being too scared to move. Through the small crack, my window was open. I heard the whisper again, saying my name. "Maddie." I freaked the heck out. I took a few seconds, which felt like hours, to muster up the strength to run to my mom. She said I was having a bad dream, until she checked out my room and immediately called the police. The police showed up and caught a man hiding in the thick trees lining the yard. My mom had to have a big talk with me and explain that this man is my biological father and is mentally disturbed. The call stopped for a few years, but have happened since, only a handful of times. I'm now 18, and honestly, they don't disturb me as much as they used to. To my creepy biological dad, I will beat your ass if you come near me. I have both loved and been creeped the heck out while reading these stories. I have a couple that I would like to share. First, let me say that my mama was a mama bear. Probably a bit overprotective, but as we were entering the era of Adam Walsh, who could blame her? She kept a close eye on me and my sister. She was so protective that I found myself shrinking whenever there was a moment that I should have used my voice. My mom was my voice. This will come into play later. This particular Sunday, I was about 8 years old. Come to think of it, this was before Adam Walsh, around 1978. We drove to Shreveport to pick up my nanny, Grandma, and take her to lunch. We only lived an hour away and usually did this once a month. Our routine included lunch at Piccadilly and the mall and then shopping or looking around. My favorite store was Hallmark, not for the cards ironically. I loved to look at the trinkets, journals, and ornaments. My mom knew this and so allowed me and my sister to go in. She and my nanny would sit on a bench right outside the store where she could look in at us through the glass. I had just walked in and was admiring the ornaments halfway back in the store when I heard, "Excuse me," behind me. I turned to see a boy, maybe 10 to 12 years old, standing behind me. "Hi, may I ask you a question?" he said. I remember even at my young age that the boy was very well spoken, almost like a salesman. His accent was not from the South. It sounded Midwestern or possibly Northern. The boy in general would not have been strange except when I looked at his face. He had a black eye and lacerations on his cheek covered with a band-aid. This boy had been beat up severely. He must have seen my shocked expression as he immediately said, "Yeah, I'm sorry about my face. It was an accident." He then quickly goes on to ask if I could help him find a card for someone's birthday for him or something to that effect. I remember turning around and looking outside of the bench toward my mom. She was in a conversation with my nanny. My sister had already left Hallmark and was sitting beside Nanny. I willed my mom to make eye contact and come be my voice. Nope, she was focused on her conversation. Sigh. I turned back around and meekly said, "I don't know." He must have noticed the look in the direction of my mom and my hesitation as he said, "It's okay. You're safe. My mom is right back there." He points to a woman with her back towards us, looking at cards, pacing a bit. "The cards I'm looking at are right back here with her. Come on. It's okay. Come on." In retrospect, I can hear the desperation in his voice. I took 2 steps towards him, and when I did, I noticed that the woman was standing next to a door. I had that gut fear almost about everything back then, but in this moment, my stomach was in my mouth. I remember wondering where that door led. Every hair on my head stood on end. He would take a step back and say, "Come on, it's okay, really." Almost like I was a puppy he was trying to wrangle. I was only 8 years old, but there was more than desperation in his voice now. There was fear. Something wasn't right. We were about 8 steps from his mom now. I immediately turned toward the mall exit and threw out a very frightened, "I've got to check with my mom." I remember the "with my mom" part. I was already out of the mall and headed towards her arms. I was in her lap in 10 seconds. She asked if I was okay and I just said, "Yeah, that boy was trying to talk to me." Both turned to look and the boy was looking out through the glass at us. As soon as he noticed my mom looking, he pretended to turn and look at cards. My mom just said, "Okay, you're alright," and turned back to my nanny in conversation. It was true. I was okay then. I think she just thought I was being shy and scared, which was usually the case. I saw the boy go back and talk to the woman or his mom. She did not look happy. I could just see fear coming off of him. She sent him back out into the store and turned back towards the cards, still standing near the door. In my adult brain, I realized that she was off, just like the boy. She was pretending to look at cards. She would occasionally glance back at the boy. I saw him go up to a couple of more people and talk. I can't remember if these people were kids or not. This could have simply been a situation where she was trying to get her son to open up and approach others in conversation. But everything in my gut tells me that she was using that boy as bait to abduct other kids. And had I gone back there with him, they would have tried to usher me out through that door into a waiting car. Then maybe I would have been bait in the future. I never told my mom about the entire incident. I knew her. She would have said, "Honey, you should have said this to him or you should have come and gotten me." I was already ashamed that I would chicken out in moments like that. I wonder often what happened to that boy. I can still see his face. Dark eyes, olive skin, dark hair. Clothes slightly disheveled. I remember looking on the news to see if there were any abductions, but I also remember his accent. He was not from our Texas or Louisiana area. He could have been taken from anywhere. There were no Amber Alerts back then. A little beat-up boy in Hallmark. I remember you. I wish I had used my voice to possibly save you. I'm sorry I was too scared. I hope you are safe. In respect for my best friend, whose life was a mess as a child, I've been keeping this story inside for a very long time. I'm going to be completely honest, I've never even spoken a word to my mother. At first, it was fear of getting social services involved. Then, after they got involved anyway, I guess too long had passed and I just figured she never really would benefit any from knowing. This all happened when we were 11 years old. I'm 29 now. It all sort of feels like a surreal dream. This feels like the appropriate place to get it out. Names changed, of course. When I was in elementary school in Canada, that's K through 6, I was an awkward child. I have high-functioning autism, and while my grades were great, my social functioning was lackluster. Still is, if I'm honest. This left me with a fairly small, very colorful group of friends. Two of the closest are Jesse and Katie. I came from a fairly overprotective household. My mom watched me like a hawk, and thus I was a naive kid. I didn't really understand that a lot of the oddness and dysfunction that would come out of my two friends had to do with problems at home. We were never allowed at Katie's house. I think her mom was extremely overweight to the point of hardly being able to move, and she was embarrassed of it. Jesse's house, however, was only a few blocks away from the school. We ended up there a lot. Her parents were divorced, and her mom was deaf and mute. My mom and her would communicate through notes, and I would go over while she at first would always seem slightly erratic. There were no real red flags. When we first started going there, Jesse's mom was living with her boyfriend as well as her boyfriend's parents. Everybody in the household was deaf with the exception of Jesse and her younger brother, but both of them had limited hearing. I think for the first year or so we were there, the boyfriend's parents kind of kept everything from getting too out of hand, but it was pretty clear it was a dysfunctional household. After they moved out of the house, it was just Jesse's mom and her boyfriend. They would often lock us in the basement and I would spend the night. It was a full apartment, so we saw it as fun freedom. But the one time they forgot to lock it, we walked in on them doing something under the table with needles. Again, we were too young to understand, but we did understand that we walked into something bad. From this point on, we would be designated to spend our sleepover nights in her garage as it was furnished with carpets and couches. The issue with this was Jesse's mom always kept the door locked so we wouldn't interfere with her activities again. So when one of us had to use the washroom, we would have to knock on the basement window until Jesse's little brother would hear and let us in through the basement window to pee. Another issue being, he was hearing impaired. Thus, sometimes it would take a literal hour of absolute banging on that window. We were young, and this felt as close to freedom as you could get. We didn't really understand why or that it was wrong or dangerous for Jesse's mom to do this, and I never told my mom. It kept going on. One night, we were doing our normal sleepover playing Pokemon Gold, trading and battling with link cables, and waiting for Jesse's mom to bring out the oven pizza that she said she was cooking us hours ago. It was about midnight, no bedtime in that house, and Katie said she really had to pee. She was trying to wait for Jesse's mom to bring in the pizza so she could go through the door, but she couldn't hold it. She goes out by herself to try and rouse Jesse's little brother Aaron. We were expecting it to take her a little while, but to our surprise, she comes back extremely quick, locking the garage door behind her and latching the lift door. She looks really startled. She tells us that she was knocking to try to get Aaron's attention when she hears a rustle from the bush next to the gate going to the front yard. It takes her a minute to realize what she's looking at, but standing about 5 feet from the gate, 15 feet from the window Katie is at, is a tall man dressed completely in black. She said it seemed like he just appeared out of the darkness, or like he was waiting for something. He asked her if she's managed to lock herself out while slowly taking a step towards the gate. As she gets up and takes a step back, his pace quickens towards her and she sprints back to the garage. At first, we thought she was just shifting with us. We laughed and told her to stop messing around. Then we heard it. Hard twisting of the locked doorknob. Then worse. The sound of scratching metal against the knob. He was trying to pick the lock. We stood in absolute fear for a moment, then grabbed the only pathetic things around we could use to try to defend ourselves. Then it just abruptly stopped. There were no windows in her garage and no peephole on the door. We couldn't see what was going on. We waited for about 10 minutes, having no idea where the man was, if he was still out there, where her mom was, or where that freaking pizza had gotten to. But we were like sitting ducks in there. He had clearly failed to pick the lock, but who knows if he would try or what he would try next. Now this is stupid, but we were stupid freaking scared children. We grabbed our weapons, which consisted of glorified sticks, and we left that garage. At first there was no sign of the man. We moved towards the downstairs window and started slamming on it, screaming and pleading for Aaron to open it. Again, that's when we heard it. It was an almost sing-song, mocking voice that rang out. "Well, hello again." 3 men, all in black. The one in the middle had spoken. They made a move forward. We once again sprinted back to the garage. This time, they just straight tried to kick in the door, all 3 of them stomping and kicking. It was close to giving in, and then everything stopped. Jesse's mom had come out the back door, pizza in hand, and startled them. She ran back inside and got her boyfriend and his 2 other friends. Users travel in packs, and they were able to chase them off with some actual weapons. I'm guessing we were still inside the garage. We could honestly just hear it. The adults stayed in the backyard all night, weapons in hand. One person even sat on the roof with a compound bow. Night turned to morning and it all settled down. We never stayed at Jessie's house for sleepovers after that. She was put into the care of her grandparents shortly after. It took me a really long time to actually grasp what happened that night, but considering they never called the police, I'm fairly sure we almost got literally murdered over some drug debt Jesse's mom had. Literally can't imagine the evils that could have gone on that night if fate wasn't on my side. Something tells me those 3 men were way too happy to find children to take as penance, and it would hardly have just been a straightforward murder. Still makes me shudder. I don't post too often, but I've been reading through all of these posts, and it sparked an encounter I had years ago on a solo bike tour. It was the spring after I graduated college, 22 female, and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, so I decided to take a pause and ride my bike down the coast from Canada to Mexico. I was pretty nervous to be going by myself, but for the majority of the time, I felt safe. Halfway through or so, I got pretty comfortable with sleeping alone in fairly empty campsites, parks, etc. There were even some stretches on the trip where I rode with other bike tourists. This one encounter, however, brought my guard back up for the remainder. I was halfway down the Oregon coast and was a mile or so from the campground I'd planned to stay in for the night. There was this notable yellow vintage Ferrari, car that had passed me in the opposite direction. When I pulled into the campground, I stopped at the information board to look at the map and fees. As I'm sitting there, I see the yellow car coming down the road and stopping where I am. This older guy in his late 50s or early 60s gets out and starts looking at the board with me. He's friendly and seems completely normal, charismatic even. He's asking me about my trip and starts mentioning how he's from the area but has never checked out this campground. At this point, I'm still pretty naive, and there are plenty of nice people I've met on the trip that chat me up and ask about the bike tour. He's talking to me and getting closer, and this is the part that starts making me uneasy. He would repeatedly reach out his hand to shake mine like he was about to leave, but every time he shook my hand, he would grab my forearm with his other hand and do this weird gasp laugh thing. The way he did it looked insane, and the arm grasp was very firm. It sent shivers down my spine. Then he drives into another topic and repeats this freaky handshake maybe 2 more times in between. I realize that I'm completely out of sight from anyone in the campground, have no phone service, and I'm now very close to him and his open car door. There's a knot in my stomach. I'm on the verge of tears, and my voice is shaking with every response. At this time, I didn't even know why, but something felt very off about him. I finally speak up loud, hoping somebody can hear me, and tell him I gotta get going. Run to my bike and speed to the campground. When I get there, I don't even try to find the hike and bike spots and just throw the tent down directly across from the camp host. Again, I had a lot of encounters with random strangers at this point, but none of them terrified me like this one. I fought with the idea that he was probably just an overly friendly guy, but the fact he would repeatedly grab my arm and laugh was frightening. All in all, most people I met were very sweet, and it made me very trusting of others. Even if he were harmless, his actions were a good reminder that I had to be mindful of my vulnerable situation and be more alert. I used to order a lot of pizza. I love pizza. Well, my local pizza place got a new driver who way overstepped the boundaries of what is acceptable. He tried to force his way into my home to share dinner with me, and just general creepy behavior. So I stopped ordering pizza. Well, really, I never noticed anything. I have a security system, so I figured all is well, and I never check it really. About 2 months after the pizza incident, I hear scratching at the side of my home. I figure it's animals. I live outside the city, so there are animals usually looking for a place to nest. There was a big fresh coating of snow. So I do what I usually do and let my dog out. He is a huge 120-pound King Shepherd ex-Maremma, and he just bolts out of the door. Again, not unlike him when there's an animal outside. But around 20 seconds later, I hear screaming and swearing, then screaming in pain and terror. You scream for my dog to come back, he does. He is a good boy and I call the police. Well, they do a search of the outside of the house. What they find is blood, lots of it, and pry marks at the side of it. We go through the footage and sure enough, there's a person who is trying to force open the window. The dog charges him and tears up his ass and leg pretty bad until I call him back. He gets up and limps off my property. Well, at the front of my property, the entrance to my drive, I have a camera. It's well hidden. I get the guy going to his car and his plate. The cops take it and go to the hospital. There was a lot of blood and the person would need medical attention. Well, the guy said, "Oh, I was trying to surprise my girlfriend and I fell." Man, I am a widow. I never plan on dating again for the rest of my life. But they come back to my house, tell me this and show me a picture. Surely enough, it was the pizza guy. They found rope, duct tape, a camera, and a knife in his car. So, take that shit seriously. This happened last night. I worked late at our retail shop. We close at 5 p.m. except for 6 weeks during the summer when there are street dances from 7 to 9 right out in front of our place. We are one of the sponsors and we give 2 $25 gift certificates as prizes for each of the weeks. Since many folks who attend are on vacation here, I like to stay open during the street dance. If somebody wins, they can walk 50 feet over to spend their prize, even if it's the last night of their trip. Plus the music is cool. They always have a good band. So after closing and doing the books, I got home about 10 o'clock. Normal. It's just my wife and me plus the dog and 4 cats. We tend to go to bed and get up early. It's a rural area. We have neighbors, but we're on a quiet lake and it was all quiet and dark by the time I rolled in. The wife and I often sleep in separate rooms because she has trouble getting to sleep and I do not at all. I trained myself to go to sleep fast decades ago and it has stayed with me. I can often get to sleep in 2 or 3 minutes, and I snore. We both do, but I definitely take the laurels for volume. I have woken myself up with loud snoring more than a few times, so I was unsurprised and unbothered to see a note asking me to sleep in one of the spare bedrooms when I entered the dark and quiet house. Our main bedroom is in the finished basement and she was there. So I settled into the place I usually choose in the upper level. It's a double bed in a small bedroom that also hosts my laptop, the dog's feeding station, and a water fountain for all pets. I like the flowing water sound. I recently washed this set of bedding and reinstalled the back on this bed instead of changing it out for another set. Just part of normal household chores, but I know I'm the one who handled it the last several times in a row. It's pretty fresh. It has been used 3 nights since then. About 4 a.m. or so, my best estimate, I woke up feeling something odd and blocky on the edge of my bed nearest the wall away from me. And it wasn't just doing something loose. It was a hard squared off lump underneath the sheet. Not very small. Bigger than my hand, just a little. A really weird thing to feel at that time in that place. I told myself it was a weird dream and went back to sleep. I woke up at my normal time of 6 feeling a bit groggy. I fell over to the side of the bed where the blocky object had been. Still there. I pulled at the sheet and was able to remove it. It was a piece of 2x4, 6 or 7 inches long. Odd as heck. Convinced I was clearly still dreaming, I rolled over and went back to sleep. I woke up about 6:30 feeling a bit closer to normal. Got up, had coffee and breakfast, did chores, tended critters and plants and headed off to the shop. Got in this evening about 6. Watched Prey on Hulu with the wife. Agreed to sleep in the same places, ate dinner, did normal evening at home stuff, came into the room and began getting ready for bed. Sitting on the cedar chest across from the bed is a 6 to 7 inch piece of 2x4. We haven't had any chunks of 2x4 sitting around this place in 6 years since I finished out the basement. I burned all the leftovers in our fire pit by the lake years ago. There have been no visitors and there is no lumber stored here, period, scrap or otherwise. I'm stumped as to how this piece of wood appeared where and when it did. It's enough out of place as to have me thinking I dreamt it when encountering it first. I don't have any known enemies, and it's not like waking up to a horse's head in the bed. What's the message to a piece of wood? Yet, I am a bit creeped out at how it could have got to be where it is. Are the trees sending me messages? What the heck? Anyone? Edit. I posted this last night just before going to sleep for the night. This morning I looked and the wood was still there, though it looks more like 4 to 5 inches long, so my sleepy brain overestimated the original length I stated. I experienced something else mildly odd. The desk light was on when I woke up. This was at 4, earlier than I wanted to be up, so I rolled over and went to sleep again until 6. It's never turned itself on before, but has a touch sensor for power and light level, so maybe it flaked last night. Odd and annoying. Light woke me, so I'm pretty sure it came on right before I woke and noticed it. I have it turned so the digital clock face on it doesn't shine towards the bed, because even that is too much light for me to enjoy trying to sleep through. I read the post on the vanishing lumber. Sounds like as good an idea as any. Though, if things are going to appear in my vicinity via tiny wormholes, or whatever that means, maybe let's do money next. It appears to be a very normal piece of wood, 2x4, unmarred, no tooth marks, etc. For clarity, the chunk of wood was found underneath the fitted sheet in the bed. The fitted sheet was otherwise in place as expected. The layers of material in the bed are frame, box spring, mattress, mattress cover, fitted sheet, flat sheet, and comforter. There are also 5 pillows. I have acid reflux and extra pillows help reduce nighttime incidents. Also, I like one under my knees for an achy back. The dog is an elderly and small Sheltie. She doesn't really do toys. The wife and I are her toys. She herds us. She can barely jump up on that bed, but I have seen her get up there on her own. I have put her up, but as soon as I stop petting her, she's down. She was stray before we adopted her, and I suspect a former male presence in her life was really critical of her being on furniture. She doesn't really get on it much. The cats, well, one of them plays with toys a lot, including tennis balls, but I can't see him picking up the wood chunk and getting it into the bed. Much less under a fitted sheet without removing the sheet from the bed on at least one corner. I have no other Reddit accounts for the person suspicious as such, and if you look at my post history, it should be obvious I'm real and far from perfect. I tend to think such things are worth an occasional peek if you believe somebody may be less than honest. When I sleep in this bedroom, I shut the door. This is primarily because one of our cats has a tendency to come get me at about 5 AM every morning if I don't. And get me, he will. It is an emergency. There is less than 1/3 of the food left in his bowl. How could I be sleeping through such a crisis? I must arise and correct this life-ending emergency this instant. So yes, I shut the door. Our windows that are open are casement windows that crank outwards. They are by default proof against casual entry when closed. Locking them does make them more secure, but you have to break the mechanism to get into one that is closed. It's a 100-plus-year-old lake cabin too. The windows that don't open are plate glass. Nobody that looks at my should have been repainted last year residence is under the impression I have a bunch of art or money in here. I asked my wife. She cackled about the giving wood comments. Guess that was the clue. I'm still puzzled by this all. I'm sorry if this is long and reads like a fever dream. This happened on my 19th birthday. I was living in Vermont on a mountain away from home as a working student on a massive horse breeding farm. It was February and obviously very snowy. We left a multi-day out-of-state event in the evening to head back to the farm. I was driving my own car, a sporty old coupe, but front-wheel drive, with new sales rep as a passenger. We are both women and she was maybe 25. The other working students were riding with the boss in the big rig or with another who was driving her van. We convoyed with everyone else until about 12 AM when the trailer had an issue near Albany, New York. We had encountered snowfall all night as there was a blizzard going on, but it was now getting bad around this time/area. The boss told me and the sales rep to keep going so that we could make it back for morning chores in case they didn't. The barn manager was the only one who stayed back at the farm. We knew she slept like a sloth on tranquilizer and she was expecting to have the day off since we would all be back. Everybody else stayed so that there was enough hands to unload the horses if needed. The rest of the trip, around 3 AM, the sales rep and I reached the back roads to get up the mountain to the farm. At this point there was about 4 inches of snow on the roads. We kept having trouble getting up hills and tried every route we could think of. I didn't have a lot of gas left and We were tired and getting nervous. The sales rep suggested another route she thought she knew, and I figured why not. I had never been this way because I would simply drive the same way down the mountain to go to town on my day off. We got pretty far with this other road, but snow was still falling and I was having trouble with the hill again. At this time we saw a house, extremely far and few between, in that area, and I was able to pull into the bottom of the driveway. It looked like they had a truck up there and there was a light in the window, so we decided that we should knock and ask them if they could drive us to the farm. I know this sounds totally nuts, but everybody knew of the farm and the boss had been there forever and seemed to know everyone personally. Plus we were together, so we figured it would be okay and it would hopefully be a nice man who knew our boss. Of course, this is where it gets weird. We are walking up and suddenly a dog starts viciously barking and lunging at the end of a very short heavy chain that is attached to a tree in a blizzard at night. This startled the heck out of us, and obviously we didn't like it on an ethical level even, but the house was only a few yards away now, so we sprinted to it. We get to the door and right as the sales rep is about to knock, I grab her hand now because that we're close up and not chatting or dealing with a scary dog. I notice the door is only a piece of plywood on hinges and the little house is a crappy looking shack. Basically like they built their own permanent shelter but didn't have the skills to do it nicely. Meanwhile, the dog is still barking and lunging on the chain. She sees what I see and we decide to back away and then end up running to the car because it was just one of those redneck properties that you imagine wouldn't appreciate visitors. It snapped us back into our senses that there could be multiple men inside or something dangerous, so especially considering the dog situation. I managed to drive up that hill that was giving me trouble before, and as we get going, we see a herd of mini horses run across the road in a line and jump into the woods. We had a good idea. Maybe not the best, considering what just happened, that if we found a farm along this road, it could be their horses and they'd be grateful for our help, catching them and driving us home. Not long after, we came to a well-kept little farm, and the road was a dead end right after. The sun was starting to come up now. We leave the car on the road and walk up to the house, which isn't set far back at all. We knock endlessly and nobody answers. Just as we started walk back to the car, the sales rep spotted something running up the road. It's the dog. We ran like heck to the car and got in just in time for the dog to jump around the outside of it, biting the mirrors and whatever it could get a hold of like he was deranged. To be clear, I love dogs. We lived with the manager's pit bull and I've now been working with dogs in many settings, including shelters for years. I have had bites and have worked with court-declared dangerous dogs. I have never seen one in person as aggressive as this before or since. We got the heck out of there and I drove as fast as I safely could away from the dog. We didn't see anything else on the road or glancing down the driveway of that shack driving past it again. When we got stuck on the next hill, we simply parked at the end of another driveway and sat there. My gas light was on and we were using the battery to run the heat. We were completely delirious, just laughing and crying while keeping on the lookout for the dog or a crazy man. Eventually, around 6:30 a.m., we saw a plow truck coming and got to flag it down. He knew our boss and gladly plowed our way home. I really do believe someone sicked the dog on us because the chain was so heavy and we were almost a mile up the road when it got to us. We also had been watching the mirrors as we left the shack because we were so freaked out already. Whether they thought they were going to break in or were just mad that somebody came up to the driveway, we'll never know. I'm just glad it was an almost creepy encounter with whoever lived in the mountain shack. This is an oddly disgusting story. Last week, I had to catch the bus to and from work as my car was in the shop. On Thursday night, it was about 8:30 when I got to the bus stop. Sitting there was a lady in her mid-20s sitting in the shelter, and a guy, likely early 30s, sitting on a couple of steps behind the bus stop shelter. I stood against the wall waiting for my bus. It was the second bus scheduled to stop there. As I waited, I noticed the guy look up at the woman whenever she would look down at her phone, like he was nervous she would see him. The woman had a bottle of water next to her. As the first bus approached, she dropped the bottle of water in the bin. In the bottle was probably a mouthful of water at the bottom. As I watched her sit down and the bus drive away, I noticed the guy got up and was looking in the bin after 5 or so minutes. He reached his arm into the bin and pulled out the bottle of water. He then ran over to a car parked across the road but south of the bus stop. I could see in his car as it was facing towards the bus shelter. I couldn't help but wonder what he was doing with the bottle. I would look up slightly every so often, and on the fourth time, I could see in the light of his car. I saw he was sniffing the water in the bottle, and then the part that made me feel ill, he licked the rim of the bottle, replaced the lid, and placed it on the seat next to him. As he drove past, we locked eyes, and he looked as if he had hit the jackpot. I felt sick in the bottom of my gut, as if I had just witnessed a crime, but with no real victim. I never saw either of them again. Okay, so this is long, but there's a lot of info. So, my mom is newly widowed, October, and had been with my dad for 48 years. She still looks great, is classy, and has always been faithful to my dad, and because of this, has always had a line of guys interested in her, including this one. I'll call him Todd. Todd has known her and my dad for years through a local watering hole they all went to. Not together, and they were friendly from there. He finds out my dad had passed away recently, so a month ago, Todd started showing up to my mom's work. She works at a local store as a cake decorator. He initially comes in and talks to her, which isn't out of the ordinary. She has many customers who come talk to her regularly, but this time Todd says some things that let us know he has been looking for info about her online. He first says, "You're 65." And she says, "Yeah," kind of confused why he's saying that. He then says, "You were born on such and such date." And she says, "Yeah," still confused. Then he says her phone number. From then on, he began contacting her a lot. She didn't think much of it at first, but even those are major red flags in my opinion. Todd starts coming to her work more regularly, calling and saying, not asking to come over too. She would say no, but he would still show up and be super pushy about things. When he would show up, she would let him in but say, "Fine, but you can only stay a half hour," etc. He would come in. They would talk and sometimes have a drink, and she would tell him it's time to leave. This continues for a few weeks, and then I come home to visit. My mom hadn't even told me about him before this, and then she comes home from work one day and is noticeably worked up. She said she has a friend coming over and it is a guy. I laugh and say, "Mom, it's fine. I know my dad would have been okay with it and wouldn't have wanted her to wait. He would want her to find somebody and be happy." She said they aren't dating or anything, but warns me that the other guy often acts like they are a couple even though they are not. So Todd comes over, and sure enough, he does just that. I'm confused initially, and by the way he is acting, it seems like they had been dating for a few months, and I'm wondering if my mom was just afraid to tell me. She's acting weird, but I can't put my finger on it. She keeps saying in front of him that he acts like they are a couple even though they aren't. He just laughs it off and tries to grab her hand, or put his hand on her leg. Then she goes into another room, and he tells me how nervous he was to meet me. He starts crying, and I think for a moment he is going to ask if it is okay to propose, because he is so serious and going on and on about how much she means to him. He tells me that my mom was sobbing to him, and he hugged her, and that she just sank into him. It was creepy AF. Of course she is going to be sobbing because her husband of 48 years just passed away, and my dad adored her. He also makes some alarming comments, like saying my mom spends too much money. She really doesn't and hasn't had a lot her whole entire life, but she is better off now financially than when my dad was here because of a few different things. My parents only recently, as in within the last 5 years, purchased their first house. He also tells her privately that she is not allowed to go out with my daughter and me that weekend. I find this out later. Needless to say, I'm not feeling good about him, and I'm lost at this point, and fuming because I don't know when this all took place. I also need to add that Todd used to work with my husband. I wouldn't have even known, as I didn't initially recognize the name, but my mom mentioned it to me. So I called to ask him about the guy, not even telling him why at first, and he instantly tells me he is a snake in the grass, untrustworthy, manipulative, and vindictive. He goes on to tell me that the guy was fired for stealing company time, and reminds me that he has told me about him before. About 15 years ago, Todd told my husband at work that Todd would be married to my mom if it wasn't for my dad. I then remember the conversation and how we all laughed and joked about it back then. I'm also very concerned at this point because I realize he had had this obsession with her for over 15 years now. So I don't address it with my mom that night because I want to collect my thoughts and don't want to hurt her feelings. The next day, she has a hair appointment, and Todd had heard her talking about it. I come back from the store and Todd's vehicle is in the drive. I'm not happy at all about it. I go in and he's there talking and standing with her in the kitchen. She tells me right away that he just stopped to see her hair real quick. I find out later he just showed up without calling. He also kept asking questions and seemed a little too interested in our St. Patrick's Day plans that first night. We were going to meet up with my grandpa and go out for a bit, as we are Irish and it is a big deal in our family. I could see he was taking mental notes of what we were saying when we talked about it, so it wasn't surprising when he brought it up the next day at my mom's. I made it a point to barely say anything, and he left a few minutes later. He leaves, and I tell my mom right away that he is not freaking coming with us the next day. She immediately says okay, and that she doesn't even really like him that much anyway, so she's fine with that. To my relief. Then he knocks at the door again and walks in and says he left his phone here. My mom says he couldn't have left it anywhere but the kitchen because they didn't go anywhere else in the house, but he makes a weird point of saying it must be on the couch when they were in there, and sure enough, it's there. Even though my mom swears they didn't even go in there. They are right next to each other, and he easily could have set it there real quick while talking to her. I almost felt as though he was listening outside, but I can't be sure. So he leaves, and I explained to her what my husband said. My husband was very concerned, mind you. To the point he said we needed to contact her work because Todd would try to get her fired as well as contact the police and let the neighbors know. I am very concerned for her safety at this point. She trusts my husband with her life, so she takes it very seriously and says okay. She goes on to tell me she'd only been talking to him for a few weeks and that he kept stopping by even though she would tell him not to. She did kind of like him but wasn't really invested or anything like that, and I think honestly she just liked having somebody to talk to. She tells me that he was going through a divorce, but they hadn't finalized it because he was still on her insurance. I get that, but then he tells her that he just went to a lawyer to finally get it done. She tells him, "Well, I hope that isn't because of me or anything," and he tells her, "Well, I already paid $5,000 to the lawyer." It makes her feel obligated to him. I also find out from my uncle that he had a run-in with him. The very first week they were talking, Todd got my mom some tires for her car. She paid for them, he just picked them up. He drops them off and my uncle is shoveling the snow in her driveway. Todd comes up and doesn't even say hi or ask him who he is, but just says, "How old are you?" in a weird way. My uncle tells him and then explains how he is related. Todd doesn't respond and walks off into the house. When he comes back out, my uncle says, "Thanks again for doing that for her. We really appreciate it." Todd doesn't even acknowledge him and just gives him dirty looks, like he is jealous. I also find out that Todd told my mom some ridiculous story about my dad offering to do drugs with him at the bar, knowing my mom is against that kind of thing and she obviously can't question my dad. It is like he is competitive with my dad, who isn't even here, and it infuriates me that he would badmouth him and say something that I know isn't true. So that brings us to St. Patrick's Day. Todd shows up to her work again and just says, "Give me your keys, I'm gonna wash your car." My mom says, "No, you can't take my car." He has never driven it before. He is just this pushy and presumptuous. She tells him he can't go with him that night and he can't come over anymore and can't call. She goes on to explain that we don't think he is good for her, that my husband is concerned, and that she wholeheartedly trusts him, so that he is to not contact her anymore. She calls me to tell me this. And while I'm on the phone with her, I start hearing somebody pounding on the door. It's him. I find out, but I don't answer. I'm not sure how it was even possible to get there that fast. He knocks for 15 minutes and then leaves a note in the door for me to call him. I don't call but text and tell him I got the note, but don't feel we need to have a phone conversation about anything. I tell him my mom explained the situation already. She doesn't want to see him anymore and he needs to respect that. He responds saying he deserves to know who said what. I tell him that's not necessary and we would have felt the same based on our interaction with him. I failed to mention earlier my daughter was also there when we met and realized she knew him. She was the main bartender for a year at the bar he frequents and she hated him. He constantly tried to tell her how to do her job. When he met her, he tried acting like he didn't know her at first. He pleads with me to speak to him on the phone and I say it's not a back and forth discussion and he needs to respect that. He then goes on and says he thinks it's all BS and that nobody said anything at all. I tell him I will do everything in my power to make sure he stays away at this point, that we have notified his work, neighbors, and the police. He continues to call that night. We have not heard from him directly since then, but he sent a mutual friend to my mom's work to let her know that Todd said he won't bother her anymore, but that if she wanted to call him in a few weeks after everybody settled down, she could. This worries me that he is still holding out hope. It also worries me about what will happen when I leave tomorrow. He knows I am leaving tomorrow as well. This happened a couple of summers ago as my boyfriend and I were driving home along a remote Forest Service road in British Columbia, Canada, returning from a camping trip. We are pretty familiar with the area we were in, having camped there several times before. Typically, the only people we encounter out here, a good 70 kilometers from paved roads, are fellow campers in off-road vehicles or logging truckers on the job. This particular day was beautiful, sunny, and warm, mid-June. We were bumping down the road at a good pace when we saw a man come out of the bush and began frantically waving at us. Very odd. We slowed down and came to a stop, with my boyfriend rolling down the window to see what this guy had to say. I was in the passenger seat, and as soon as we slowed down, I picked up a weird vibe. He was wearing a blue plaid construction worker's flannel coat, much too heavy for the warm weather, with khaki pants and work boots. He was clean-shaven with messy gray-brown hair, pale skin, and large glasses. He was maybe 50. Let me stress how unusual it is to run into somebody way out there without a vehicle. The guy was fairly soft-spoken and calmly, almost robotically told us that his car battery is dead. He asked us for a jump. Okay, sure. We believe in road karma, and always want to help people out in trouble when we're in the bush. But where is the car? He tells us that he's been fishing all day and has been playing his radio, and it caused his battery to die. His car is down a very overgrown side road a little further up the main road. He walks ahead while we slowly follow behind him in our truck. Both my boyfriend and I are a bit weirded out, and we joke around with each other as we're following him that we hope he's not luring us in the bush to kill us. Except I legit felt on edge, and the joke didn't seem that funny. We followed him about 150 meters down the overgrown side road into a small heavily treed area, just wide enough for about 4 cars to park side by side. We never would have noticed this road if it hadn't been pointed out to us because bushes had nearly covered the entrance. Anyway, sure enough, there is a car there, an older model, beige Chevy car that looks very unsuited to the rough logging roads. The trunk is open for some reason and a blanket is draped over it. The hood was already popped on the car, so my boyfriend got out, grabbed our jumper cables from the back seat of our truck, and began attaching the cables to the car. Meanwhile, I swung my leg over the center console and slid into the driver's seat. I felt very uneasy and looked around the cab for anything that could be a weapon, all while telling myself I was being silly. But nonetheless, I wanted to be ready to act if something threatening happened. The guy chatted with my boyfriend jovially, telling him about his buddy he was fishing with, but apparently he went on ahead without him. But his friendliness seemed forced. He stood back, allowing my boyfriend to do everything, lingering behind him watching while the boyfriend got the car batteries hooked up. There was an awkward pause and my boyfriend had to prompt the guy to get in his car to crank it over. Throughout this, I sat in the driver's seat watching, feeling tense. The car fired up easily and the guy got back out of his driver's seat. He said thank you in an oddly intense way. My boyfriend removed the cables and hopped onto the passenger seat without bothering to put the cables away properly, and the moment the passenger door closed, I was reversing back down the narrow side road with branches scraping across both sides of our car. We got onto the main road within moments and went on our way. My boyfriend told me that the guy watched us the entire time as I backed down the road. Could have just been a socially awkward guy with a legitimately dead battery, but I can't help but feel this guy's intentions were more sinister, and the fact that I stayed vigilant in the car and that my boyfriend was efficiently competent with the jumper cables helped us dodge a bullet. Not sure if the battery was really dead, but neither of us remember seeing any fishing gear. This happened all the way back in 1998 when I was in grade 7. Our school system required that all students take a semester of woodshop and a semester of home economics every year of middle school. Semesters were 5 months long. In my part of Canada at that time, middle school was grades 7 and 8. Our woodshop teacher was a man in his mid-50s named Mr. P. He had quite a reputation. Older girls warned younger girls every year. If you were female, you never wanted to be stuck alone in his class with him. If you got detention, you begged a classmate to either intentionally get into trouble so you deserved detention together, or begged to have them stay late to work on their project after school. Anything to avoid being alone with him, as the older girls said he would start to say hugely inappropriate and graphically sexual things, and then even start touching. Starting with the girl's hands, arms, then her hair, shoulders, back, and then, well, worse. Much, much worse. It was an open secret. The principal and school board had to have known, but things weren't like how they are now. People didn't listen when kids complained, and the school board was heavily invested in covering for bad or abusive teachers. We were sort of left having to deal with these things on our own, with no support and no adult help. Wendy was a girl in my class. We weren't close friends, as she hung with a different group than I did, but we got on well enough. Reasonably good acquaintances, I guess. One day, Wendy got in trouble for talking in class when Mr. P was trying to go over safety info for a new piece of equipment and was given detention. Her friends were all on the same sports team, which was leaving the school right at the dismissal to go play another school's team, so they couldn't stay with her. Wendy had been given detention by Mr. P once before, for talking when she shouldn't be, so she was petrified at the prospect of being stuck alone after school with Mr. P again. And she went from classmate to classmate for the rest of the day, begging for their help. Everyone had some reason they couldn't stay, so she was getting absolutely desperate and was nearly in tears. Finally, she got to me. I wasn't on the sports team. I was a clumsy, bookish, shy, nerdy kid who avoided sports whenever possible and didn't have anything on after school that day, so I agreed. I would stay and work on the crappy birdhouse project we'd been assigned. Wendy got to Mr. P's classroom before me. I had stopped in my locker in the washroom before going to the shop room. When I got there, Mr. P was already sitting right beside Wendy, and it looked like he was about to stroke her hair. When he saw me, he yanked his hand away as if he'd been burned and stood up, putting space between him and her. He glared at me and demanded to know why I was there. I stammered out that the lie I wanted to work on my birdhouse assignment. In reality, I was further ahead in my project than most of the others were, so instead of grabbing my nearly finished birdhouse from the rack, I grabbed Wendy's and began working on it. For the entire 45-minute detention, he sat at his own desk, silently seething and glaring at me. When Wendy's detention was over, we took off nearly at a run. She thanked me profusely, and that was that. As far as I know, Mr. P has never faced any real consequences for being a creep pervert. I'm absolutely certain that he has sexually assaulted many girls over his long career. What a frickin' creep. A little over a month ago, I had gone to pick up an item from a seller who, for the sake of anonymity, we will call Mike, who lives in Canada. We exchanged a few messages regarding pickup, and he was dead set on meeting just outside his house. He wouldn't budge on it and said word for word, if not specific place here. Then I am done here. He seemed to have quite a stubborn and aggressive temper right off the bat, so I was hesitant to even meet him, but the item I was looking for was something that was sold out online everywhere, so the fact I found one for sale for much cheaper than its original price won me over. It turns out my gut instinct was right from the start, because when I went to do the pickup, it got worse. He told me he liked to kill and skin animals for fun. He tried to bribe me into his apartment or walk me back to where I was headed. He was asking where I lived in high detail, and at one point he even tried to put his hands on me, but I took a step back and stood my ground. He was asking a lot of really personal and quite frankly creepy questions, and though I didn't answer them in the ways he probably expected me to, I just tried to act polite and not upset him any further, as in his messages he was saying that he was angry and had a horrible day. Once we went our separate ways, he acted all giddy over the fact that the app supposedly links your phone number to your account, and that would be his way of keeping in touch with me. Needless to say, I blocked his account, as he seems to be a really dodgy and sketchy character. He looked miserable and upset when I said I didn't use social media, which I truthfully don't, but he was desperate to stay in contact with me somehow. Keep in mind, this man looked to be in his late 30s or 40s, slim build, white dude who claimed to have some super attractive wife he met on plentyoffish.com. Yeah, creepy. I was tempted to file a report against him with the police, but because he technically didn't do anything, I found that it would be pointless to do so, and instead I am posting a warning about it here on Reddit. Please stay safe out there. Have somebody tough with you, or really anyone with you, even if it's a group of people. I legitimately feel like this seller is capable of harming another human being, and it's only a matter of time. This happened to me almost 20 years ago, but it still gives me the creeps. I had booked a taxi with a licensed taxi firm, long before the days of Uber, to take me from a friend's house to my home in the early evening. It was dusk as the driver arrived. As I left the house to get into the car, he was coming to the house to get me, and for some reason, as he turned to walk back to his car with me, he briefly touched my shoulder with his hand. It wasn't lingering, but it was deliberate, and my immediate thought was, why is this guy touching my shoulder? My intuition said it wasn't right, but I was in my 20s, and this guy must have been in his 50s, and I convinced myself that it was just something people from that generation did. I sat in the back. The journey should have been around 20 minutes from North to South London, and in the first 5 minutes of the journey, there was some initial chat where he told me I was his last job of the day, and he had no plans afterwards. When he told me that, I felt a pang of fear, but I thought, this guy is from a licensed firm. He's been identity checked and approved to do the job. His ID card with his name and photo and registration number was clearly displayed on the dash. He was from a firm my friend used regularly and had an account with, although she had not met this particular driver. My logical brain told me that he's clearly traceable to me if he decides to do anything, so he just wouldn't take that risk. Plus, it was early evening in a very busy area, and that made me feel safer. Also, by this time we were already on the road. I spent the next 15 minutes or so of the journey looking at my phone. I really don't know why. Maybe I was purposely trying to distract myself because I was nervous, but I felt my nerves were very unreasonable. This was the early 2000s, so the phone would have been basic compared to today's standards, but there must have been a game, I'm thinking snakes, or something on it that distracted me because I did not look out the window for some time until I noticed it was mostly dark, and when I did, I expected to be very close to my home. To my horror, I saw we were in some very deserted part of town I had never seen. This area was most certainly not on the way from my friend's house to mine. It should have been a straightforward drive through central London, and this was a very remote area with what looked like an abandoned housing estate and abandoned cars. I looked to the driver to ask where we were, but before I had the chance to say anything, I noticed he was repeatedly looking left and right down the dark alleyways we were going past. And I noticed we were slowing down. I also noticed he was breathing weird, very audibly, like in a sort of pumped, wound up kind of way. And that's when this overwhelming sense of knowing hit me. He was looking for a deserted place to stop. At that point, a very clear voice in my mind told me that he was going to do something very bad and I had to think fast. I blurted out, "I don't know where I am." He didn't say anything. I then said the words to the effect of, "My friend asked me to call her when I was home safe, and I should be home by now, so I need to call her and tell her I'm not home safe, or she will call your firm and call the police because she's over the top like that." That must have jolted him into thinking about the consequences of whatever he was planning to do. These really were the very early days of mobile phones, and not everybody had one of them, especially the older generation. Perhaps it was a lifeline he hadn't considered I might try to use. With that, he turned out of his abandoned area and we came to a main road, and after a while I saw places I recognized and we headed towards my home. He said, "Well, I'm sorry if I made you worried, but there was something weird about the way he said it." And that wasn't the end of it. When we got close to my home, I decided I did not want him dropping me off there. I lived with my sister, but she was staying at her boyfriend's house that night and we lived in a communal block. I was concerned he might be in the main front door and try to get access to my flat. So I said I realized I didn't have milk at home and he could drop me off at the store down the next street. He had to agree to this, obviously. I entered the store and hung around in there for a bit. I remember being completely broke in those days. My friend paid for the ride via her account. I did have milk at home and certainly wasn't going to buy some unnecessarily. So after a few minutes, I left the store and walked the 3 to 4 minute walk back to my flat. As I approached my flat, it was completely dark by now and the area around my flat was poorly lit. I saw a car parked facing the main door of my flat and I thought, "Oh man, it's him." And I know he would clearly be able to see I had no milk as I didn't even have a bag on me, so he would know I was lying. As I passed the car, I couldn't bring myself to turn to look at him, so I got my keys out, quickened my pace, and entered quickly. Once in my flat, I plucked up the courage to look out of the window, and sure enough, it was that guy. He had driven from where he dropped me off to my flat and was sitting in his car staring at my flat. Just then my friend called and I told her I had just gotten home. She couldn't believe how long it had taken, around an hour when it should have been 20 minutes, and I explained the whole thing. As I was on the phone with her, I looked out the window again and he had finally gone. I didn't report any of this at the time, and from my safe vantage point of 20 years down the line, I regret it. But at the same time, I still doubted my gut instinct. Even though I had had this strong sense of knowing in the car, after the event, I convinced myself it was fleeting hysteria and my logical brain returned. My logical brain also told me that if I did report him, nothing could be done because he hadn't actually done anything I could prove, and if he admitted the detour, he could say he took a wrong turn and he would just deny having returned to my flat. But reporting him might cause trouble for him and he knew where I lived, and that scared me more. I was always cautious around my flat after that and thankfully never saw him again. I should have reported it. I know nothing would have been done, and I would have probably created a bigger risk to my safety in so doing. But I should have reported it for other people's sake, and I regret it. It was the summer of 2006. I was 16 and I had just gotten my driver's license. I lived in a small suburb in South Georgia. It was a small coastal community that rarely ever had crime. The neighborhood I grew up in did not have a community pool, but the neighborhood next to ours did. My mom's friend lived in the adjacent neighborhood and had given us passes to use whenever. One day, my mom was cleaning and asked me to get my brother out of the house to entertain him. He was only 6 at the time, so I thought we could go to the pool and chill for an hour to help my mom. We get to the pool and there's what I assume is another family. Nothing out of the ordinary. When we walk in, I see it's a man with what I assume are his children in the pool. There were a lot of very young kids with him, maybe 5 or 6 kids that ranged in age, but none older than 10. He saw me and immediately stopped playing in the water with the kids so he could watch me. I quickly put my stuff down on a chair from theirs and I tell my brother he can get in the pool. I lie out to sunbathe and this man has not stopped staring. I ignored my gut feeling and thought he wouldn't do anything with all of his kids around. Next thing I know, this man is standing over me with a towel around his waist. He sits next to me and asks me something about my son. He's hard to understand as he had a thick accent and spoke quietly at first. I explained that what he assumed was my son is my brother. I quickly told him my age, hoping there was a misunderstanding and he would leave. He continued to ask me questions about where I lived and if it was close by. Very predatory questions. As I began to answer with a lie, he opened his towel to reveal wet see-through tighty-whities with the chub. When I say I saw everything, I mean everything. He grins at me with a smile like a Cheshire cat and begins fondling himself. I immediately grabbed my phone and pretended like I had a phone call from my mom. I grabbed my stuff and snatched my brother out of the pool and then jumped in the car. Before I pulled off, I could see him in my rear view standing there with his hand on his junk. He had followed us to the car. I was crying when I got home and my mom came outside frantic because she could hear how distraught I was. I told her what happened and she called the police. They arrested him. Apparently, the kids he was with were his girlfriends. She came to the pool to try and defend him by saying in his country people swim in underwear. My mom let her have it, she said. Do they also fondle themselves in public in front of minors in this country? You have small children that you let this man watch alone. I was so thankful nothing worse happened, and I hope that woman thinks twice before leaving her kids alone with someone. So this happened about 8 years ago. I lived in a cheap apartment complex. I was studying at the time so I couldn't afford anything better. With 3 other apartments on my floor, I lived on the 3rd floor. Of these 3 neighbors, I partially knew one guy. He was a young named Christian dude who used to work out at the same gym as I did. But the one living next to me really creeped me out. He was an older grumpy guy who never talked to anybody. Sometimes I watched him searching our trash but never found out what he was looking for or why he did that. One day at around 11 p.m. I heard some loud noises that sounded like somebody was coughing to death at the grumpy man's place. I got up and knocked at his door asking if everything was okay. I heard someone approaching the door. The old dude yelled from behind the door something like, "What the hell do you want?" He had a strong accent so I barely understood him. I asked him if he needed help or an ambulance as I heard the coughing through the wall. The only thing I got back was, "I'm fine. Will you screw off?" I got annoyed and went back to bed. At least nobody was coughing the rest of the night. After this night, he started watching me through his window every time I went outside to have a smoke. When I got my degree, I moved back in with my parents. Like I said, it was a pretty crappy place, and the guy next to me really started to creep me the heck out, so I just wanted out of there. 3 years later, I met Christian again, who told me that the guy next to me had strangled a prostitute in his apartment, and according to him, hid the body in his closet. He got busted as he tried to dispose of it in the woods near that apartment. He originally came from South Africa, where he sat in prison for 10 years for carjacking and almost killing a person. I often refuse to talk about this because I'm still shivering when I think back to the time I lived in this crappy apartment. Just for context, my boyfriend and I are homeless and we live in our car. There is a road that leads to a quiet beach on the bay near some train tracks, and there is only one road to exit. So not a lot of people come down this way, unless it's for beach access. People going to work in the industrial plants on the road, none of which were open, or going to an AA meeting. Again, none of which were open at the time, or if they are sleeping in their cars as well. Nothing in the area was open except maybe a couple of bars, and even those were a good 3 or 4 blocks away. Most of the stretch of road has 8-hour parking signs, so there are usually at least a few other people camped for the night, most of whom we have seen before, but tonight there wasn't as many. Just a few vehicles taking advantage of the overnight parking. We parked a little further up the road than we normally do, hoping to get a better internet connection. It was a little after 12:30 a.m. and we were relaxing watching YouTube with the dog, starting to get sleepy when we heard a car pull up behind us with their lights off. We cover our windows totally around so nobody can see in, but we can peek out if we move the blanket, and we can see headlights from cars passing or approaching. My boyfriend said it was a van. We didn't think much of it and kept trying to watch our show, annoyed with the spotty Wi-Fi connection. There were a few words exchanged on what sounded like was the other side of the street, not behind us where the van pulled up. It sounded like there were 3 or 4 people. A little bit later, the van drove off. Then we heard a knock on my side of the window, driver's side. We shut off the volume on the laptop and called out. Yeah? Silence. So we called out. Can we help you? But again, there was nothing. It was then that I realized that my door was unlocked, so I quickly locked it. After about 30 seconds of quietness, I pulled open the cover and nobody was there. Whatever. There are sometimes bums walking around. They could have thought we were someone else. It was silent for a while, then we could see in the light of the street lamp, through the crack on the sun reflector covering the front windscreen, the silhouette of somebody walking around the front of the car slowly. It was another solid minute after we saw the movement before we heard a quieter tapping on the passenger side window. This time my boyfriend pulled the cover down almost right away, and again we didn't see who it was. Right after this, there was a knock on my door again. It was right about then we realized that there was still more than one person around the car. There was no time for one person to get from the passenger side to my side between the second and third knock, and we had heard more than one voice prior. I started to think that maybe not everybody had gotten back inside from the van before it drove off. So after the third knock, I pulled my window covers down again almost all the way. I'm super annoyed and on edge by now. There was a skinny white male, probably in his mid-30s to early 40s, holding a flashlight and something else scooped awkwardly in the other hand. Almost like he was keeping it under his sweater, but we couldn't make it out. The windows were steamed up from us breathing inside with the windows shut tight, so it was really difficult to see out. He said, "Hey, I need a jump." Interesting, since there are no stores nearby. No reason to be down here at 1 a.m. We said, "Sorry, we're just about to take off. We're in a rush." He got frustrated and whined. "Come on, I've been down here for hours." Okay, if he had been down here for hours, why did he A, not ask us to help him out about 45 minutes prior when we pulled up, parked, let our dog out to eat, go potty, etc., and get our bed set up? Or B, attempt to start the car at any point. We never heard a motor rev up and an attempt to turn the engine or even the jingling of keys. Another creepy reason is why I could only see him. He said I need a jump. I've been down here for hours when I could clearly hear that there was more than one person around, but we couldn't see them. For one reason or another, they were standing out of view, not making themselves known. After this, he grumbled and went across the street to a white car with black rims that we had seen before, but not associated with him. I got this awful feeling in my gut, and even though all the windows were steamed up, I started the car and told my boyfriend to start wiping the windows so I could see, and I just started driving. We could feel that there was something sinister about the whole situation. For one reason or another, they were trying to get us to open a door or window. When that didn't work, they didn't respond because they didn't have a good reason made up yet, so after a couple of attempts to get us to open the door, they gave us the sob story, hoping we would get them out of the car so they could either steal the car while we were trying to help them or get to my boyfriend, either him directly or so they could get to me, or they were going to rob us for the laptop, which I am sure they could hear and see the glow of on the screen. The possibilities are unsettling and endless. Or Maybe he was just a guy who happened to need a jump at 1 a.m., nowhere near any stores or houses, and I'm the jerk that left some poor guy down there on the side of the road, right? Well, we drove to McDonald's to eat something and parked in the back driveway of someone we knew so that we weren't right out in the open anymore. The lock on our trunk recently broke and is held together with only bungee cords, with most of our belongings inside, so it worries me that it could make us an easier target for thieves. The next morning, we were down there again and the white car with black rims was still there. Only now the back window was busted out, and the man was nowhere in sight. I think it was never his car to begin with. I think all of those people came in the van and one of them drove off so that the rest of them could rob someone outright or so they could break into the parked cars on the side of the street when no one was in them. It was really stressful and my boyfriend had been rattled for days. We are nervous to park in the same spot, so we are now looking to rent a residential driveway to park at night where we won't be so vulnerable. My boyfriend teased the dog for not barking, but I think it was very intuitive of him because if we needed to pretend we were inside, we would have been able to do so. Maybe it would have scared them right off. I like knowing he will wait and watch me to know what to do in stressful situations. I'm just so relieved that I was not down there by myself. Even the two of us together were pretty nervous, knowing that we were likely outnumbered, but if it were just a 120-pound female like myself in the car alone, I am worried they may have been a bit more aggressive about getting the door opened. Sometimes I think I watch too many murder investigation shows and conspiracy theory videos, and that may make me paranoid. Maybe it's the fact that my grandfather was a sex crimes and homicide detective for 30 years in the same area, and I grew up with him constantly warning me of the dangers that lurk in the dark and what can happen to a person. He taught me that real monsters are not boogeymen. They are just plain men. This happened about a year and a half ago. I was at work, night shift, a little past midnight and ordered DoorDash for myself and my supervisor since it was her birthday. I was happy to see I had the same driver as last time as I work in a small building among other identical buildings with a convoluted road system in between them all. It can be a little bit confusing for somebody not used to it. I had been watching the map and went outside once he was close by. I stood under a cluster of bright lights in our parking lot. Wearing neon yellow, you couldn't miss me. I immediately get a call from my driver asking me to come to him. I look around and don't see anyone until I walk a couple of yards to the center of the lot. He's sitting on the side of my building by the dumpster, where there is no light. He also has his lights off. I'm thinking, what the heck, dude? I start waving my arms and telling him I'm in front of the building. He's on the side. He hangs up and just chills there for a minute, I guess. At this point, I'm really annoyed because our food is getting cold, and this guy delivered to me in this exact same spot a week before. Finally, he turns his lights on and comes over to me. As soon as he pulls up, he's speaking another language into his phone, which then translates to English. Something like, "Hello, I am practicing English. I need new friends. Will you be my friend?" And then puts the phone towards me. I feel like I am speaking to a child because, hello, this is inappropriate, and I just say, "Oh, that's a cool app," and look at him waiting. He keeps speaking into the app about needing friends, and I tell him my supervisor is waiting for me and reach my hand out for the food. He tries to touch my hand and then asks for my number. At this point, the fact that he had tried to get me in the dark plus his persistence turned my growing annoyance into fear. I tell him I need the food and he asks me to get in his car in perfect English. At this moment, somebody in my sister's building comes out and makes their way over to the lot. He finally gives me my food and scurries off, which freaked me out. Why after all that would he speed off at the sight of another person? Clearly his intentions were not good. I reported all of this to DoorDash at the time as well as my local police and on social media, and it turns out he'd done this to somebody who lives 2 miles away from me. She had also ordered late at night, and he apparently asked her if she lived alone and if they could hang out while holding her food hostage. DoorDash assured me that they had deactivated him, but his boldness plus the fact that he seemed to only drive late at night makes me think that he does this a lot and has probably already assaulted someone. I was about 9 years old, so this was probably 1996, playing in my family's huge front yard. We lived in a quiet neighborhood just outside of city limits. A man drove up and pulled this car over on the side of the road. He got out and greeted me. He then told me that he was lost and asked me how to get to a specific city over an hour away. I knew the name of the city, but obviously not how to get there. I pointed the direction of the highway and said I thought that might be the right way. I vaguely remember telling him I didn't know and that he should ask an adult. To this, the man started making comments such as, "Oh, well, I'm sure you can help me. You look like a really smart girl." Then the man pulls out a map and sets it on the hood of his car. Asks me if I can come show him on his map where the specific city was. As a child, it didn't even dawn on me that the stranger had a map and would be able to find the city himself. I just kept saying I didn't know how to get to the city he was asking about. He kept telling me I looked smart and emphasizing that he was lost and needed help. And because somebody nearby was mowing their lawn, it was hard to hear, so the man would say he couldn't hear me and ask me to come closer. I didn't move closer, but he did. My parents had planted hedges around our yard, but at the time the shrubs were pretty short. At this point, the man had moved from the front of his car and started crossing the hedge line, asking me to come closer so he could hear me. Now here's the part I wasn't aware of, and my mom filled me in on when I was older. She and my dad were inside the home. We have a bunch of windows facing the front yard, but also a bunch of trees between the house and yard so my parents wouldn't necessarily see me. My mom said our dog Annie, a 3-year-old German Shepherd, Golden Retriever, and Boxer mix, was going apeshit. Annie was barking non-stop while running from the door and windows over to my parents over and over again. My parents were in the middle of something and just thought Annie probably had to pee. My mom went to let Annie outside, and my mom said the moment she opened the door, she flew off the porch. My mom swears Annie was hauling ass so fast that the dog didn't even touch the porch. Now back to the scene between me and the stranger. He was at the hedge line, maybe 12 feet across from me. I'm just standing there and suddenly Annie comes shooting across the yard and stops in front of me. She was the sweetest dog and we have had her since she was a puppy. The runt of her litter, but still a good-sized gal considering her mix of breeds. Now here Annie was. She had a full-on mohawk from head to tail, standing straight up. She was baring her teeth, snarling and snapping towards the strange man. I remember looking at her and trying to get her to calm down. Still, this didn't stop the strange man. He slowly took a step forward into the yard. Annie seemed to be fully aware that this man had evil intentions because she never backed down. In fact, she kept me behind her and kept backing up, pushing me back. She was not going to let that man get past her. Still, the guy cautiously made a couple more steps. Around this time, my parents looked out the window to see where Annie went. Of course, they see the whole scene out in the yard and freak out. They ran out the door screaming. I just remember being so confused with everything going on. The strange man, the neighbor's loud mower, Annie looking crazy, and my parents running and screaming are all strange. When the strange man saw my parents coming, he ran back to his car and gunned it down the street. I vaguely remember seeing the stranger's map flying in the air as my dad threw me over his shoulder and ran back towards the house. So yeah, it seems like this dude was totally trying to abduct me and my dog saved my life. Like, it's crazy to think what could have happened. Annie was an incredibly good girl that we had till I was 17. In my previous posts, I talked about the man that tried to take my sister off our front lawn. To recap, a year and a half ago, my adopted mother called me one day to go pick my little sister after she got on the wrong bus. When I got there, I found a strange man talking to her. I scared him off, but over the next few months, weird things kept happening around our yard. Finally, one of Rosie's coats disappeared and was returned hours later, with all the tears and rips fixed. After what seemed like months of asking the police for help, they said if anything else happened, they'd come over right away. That brings us to barely 24 hours later. It was a Saturday night and Claire was supposed to go out with Diane for dinner, a movie, and maybe some dancing. I was supposed to go out with my own girlfriend, and a neighborhood kid was supposed to watch all 4 kids. Diane's 2 and Claire's 2. The girl was like 14 and her parents lived 2 doors down and would be home all night. All of us were really unsure about it, and after much deliberation, I insisted that I'd be the one to stay home, and my girlfriend would come over to help. Keep me company, shall we say. Fast forward a few hours later, the kids had just eaten dinner and the ladies were ready to go out. I was inside getting dinner ready for me and my girlfriend, and they just left as she came up our driveway. I thanked her for changing her plans, and she let herself in. Bit of backstory on my girlfriend Tara. She's 19, but very tall and very thin. When she gets dressed up, she can look late 20s and be absolutely drop-dead gorgeous. However, when she's dressed down in sweats and a tank top, that probably won't stay on through the night. She's lucky to pass for legal to drive. That's a small detail that becomes important. So, we had a good night hanging out around the kids. The boys, David and Sam, are absolutely nuts over her and have been trying to steal her from me since they first met Tara. They don't leave her lap throughout the whole movie, and the girls, Rosie and Kaylee, wouldn't leave mine. Everything went smoothly, even bedtime, and before long all four of us are fast asleep, leaving us to finally go downstairs to enjoy our date. We have a romantic candlelight dinner a few hours late, but that didn't matter. Put on a movie that neither one of us paid any attention to and fell asleep on each other. It's nearly midnight when I hear the screaming. Flinging myself off the couch and out from underneath the very startled Tara, I take the stairs by the twos and end up in Rosie's room where she and Kaylee are in the bottom bunk shrieking. Both girls practically jump into my arms, nearly hysterical, and neither one can make any sense until I see Rosie pointing out the window. I feel Tara behind me and pass my girls off to her before turning off the light and looking out the window. He's there, standing out there in our front yard, staring up into Rosie's room at the top bunk where she had just been sleeping. My heart stops and I duck down before he can see me, my voice practically hissing as I tell Tara to take the girls into David's room, lock the door and call the police. I make sure they're in there before I check the window again and they're gone. Nowhere to be seen. My heart starts racing at this point and I double check the door. As I hear Tara on the phone with the police, the sound of the front door jiggling breaks me from concentration. I move to the stairs and watch from the windows as he moves from the front door to the back, trying each point of access he can find before turning back to the front yard. At this point, I'm set off like crazy. Not only am I kind of anxious for myself, but I also have Rosie upstairs who's already been traumatized by this guy. 3 other kids who are now awake and scared, and my girlfriend. 5 people I do absolutely anything to protect. Seeing him continue to try to each window and door, I panic as I realize he can get into our garage again, and that's where we keep our sports equipment, like baseball bats and hockey sticks. Things that could be used to break open windows. When I hear the garage door start to open, I lose it. The next thing I remember is the police showing up and Tara pulling me off the guy before the cops take him to the ground. As they get him in the back of the squad car, he's screaming and cussing at me. Tara fills me in that after she heard the front door slam open and she ran downstairs after me, and found me having tried to drag the man to the ground, the 2 of us throwing punches as I was screaming for him to never come near my family again. When they finally get him under control and come to talk to me, they explained that the reason they got there so quickly was that they had been in the area checking in on things, when they found an abandoned car on the other side of the forest, directly across from where the forest ends beside our place. They found it suspicious and checked the car only to find kids' toys and pictures. When they got Tara's call, they knew the 2 were connected. When the 2 mothers got home, they revealed that the pictures they had found were of Rosie. Dozens of pictures on various days and in various places. The back seat was full of toys for a little girl and the trunk had clothes and blankets. When he finally confessed, he told the police that he'd been watching her for months before he even tried to take her off the lawn, that he was stopped by me, and that when he saw her mother go out and what he thought was a young teenage babysitter come over, my girlfriend Tara, he planned on breaking in to take her. He never really explained why, other than he wanted her, but he ended up getting charged with stalking a minor and misconduct. So the creepy guy that not only tried to take my little sister off the curb, but also stalked her for months and was going to break into our home to take her, doing who knows what to the babysitter and the other kids in order to do that. We've met more than I ever wanted to, and if I ever see you near her or the others again, I'll finish what my girlfriend stopped me from doing. Background. I immigrated to a small town, around 20,000 in the northeastern US, a little over a year ago from Australia. There are a handful of people of my nationality here, but we are pretty few and far between. I work in a job where I have a little bit of profile in the community. That's somewhat relevant. A few weeks ago at work, I saw this message in my Facebook other inbox The one where messages from people I'm not friends with go. It's obviously from a dude in the area based on the limited information I can read on his profile, so I figured it was some random person who'd seen my work, found me on Facebook and wanted to drop me a line. It happens every now and then, so I wasn't terribly fazed. It read, "Hello, how are you? I've been to Australia 3 times for a total of 1.5 years. I lived in this city and here, and I went back in 93 and 2014. Please put in a friend request." I couldn't figure out how to do it from my end, as there was no option. "Hope to hear from you. Thanks, Phil." Later that night, I get home from work and I'm having dinner with my girlfriend who owns a bar I work weekends at. She starts dying laughing and says, "Oh shit, I forgot to tell you. And you're going to kill me." My first customer today wanders in, and already I can tell he's a bit weird. He asked for a beer and I give him one. And then he asked me what age ranges of women come in here. I tell him like 25 plus, he says. That's my age range. I'm 44 and keep rambling on to her. Somehow he gets to the topic of Australia and how he's been there a few times. She says, "Oh, my boyfriend is that nationality actually." And I cut her dead off with, "Wait, is his name Phil?" She falls about laughing and is like, "Yup." I yelled, "F me, man." Apparently, he spent a good hour showing off his knowledge of my country's slang terms and geographical tidbits before asking where I lived. No, where exactly does she live? Like what street? What my full name was, and whether I worked there. He told her that he loves people of my nationality and that he's a state certified guide so he could take me out canoeing or hiking or whatever. Yeah, like I'm gonna frickin' do that in the woods with a strange dude who tracked me down over Facebook just because I'm from a country he loves. He goes back into the bar 2 nights later, a Friday night, and my girlfriend texts me saying that he asked her whether he got my full name right because he sent me a Facebook message and he never responded. He then proceeded to repeat his repertoire of my country's lingo and told a handful of off-color jokes, offending at least one female bar patron. He said that he would be back the following night to see me. A snowstorm that weekend meant I dodged the bullet that Saturday night, but the following weekend he walked in the door of the bar as I was seating a couple of customers. I give him a token. "How's it going?" And he launches straight into, "Are you the nationality guy?" "Shit. Well, I'm one of them," I said. He perches himself right on a bar stool in front of me, orders a beer, and proceeds to talk nonstop. Rattles off all the places he's been. Countless random trivia facts about my country. Do you know how much total area the continent consists of? And stuff like that. And all of the places he wanted to visit. He wasn't just intense and creepy, he had absolutely no situational awareness. It was a busy Saturday night in a bar. I'm the only bartender and I'm running around the room serving people, but he wouldn't stop talking at me the entire time. Thankfully, the girl sitting next to him was also not from around here. Colombian, I think, and he got distracted talking to her about taking her out into the woods. Eventually, he asked for his check, pointedly showed me the tip line and asked me if it was enough. It wasn't, but please screw off anyway, and left. Although initially my girlfriend had thought it was funny and that he was bent on meeting me, she quickly became creeped out by his behavior too. I managed to avoid him for a week or two after that. Until one Friday afternoon when the girlfriend and I were having a quick lunch at the pub before I went into the office. We sat at a table next to the main bar, and who should cut his conversation with the bartender, whom we know, in mid-sentence, turn around and stride over. "Your friendly neighborhood creep. I've got something to show you," he said, as he rummaged in the pocket of his jeans before pulling out a large handful of loose change. My country's change. Yeah, I've seen Australia's currency before. Do you actually carry that around with you all the time?" "Well, I love Australia." Yeah, that much is evident. He again gave me this shtick about how he wants to visit this city and that city. For the 3rd time I've heard it now, and again failed to recognize my half-turned away, ignoring him body language. Mercifully, the bartender came over to take our order, and Phil left to pay his tab. The bartender brought over a slip of paper Phil had written his information on, in case anybody was interested in going out in the woods for outdoor activities. It was like something they'd find in Ted Bundy's Personal Effects. The handwriting and general layout of this note made me immediately and genuinely question this guy's grip on reality. He leaves and I breathe an audible sigh of relief. We start talking to the bartender about our other weird interactions with the guy. And of course, who should return quietly, probably hearing everything in the process because he left his coat on the coat rack. He showed up at the bar again later that night while I was at the office, and told my girlfriend that he's also a profession that involves being around children. Ugh, want to know the best day of my life? He asked her. He said he was asked to speak to an audience of students at an all-girls private school one time when he was in Australia in his 30s. Afterwards, he said he slept with one of the seniors. Somehow I didn't ask for further details. I haven't seen him since, thankfully, but he cropped up elsewhere in what I hope is a small world. Small town coincidence. I had relayed this story to a coworker last Friday after she told me a similar story about being harassed by a weirdo that she talked to on a dating website. Today she says, I think the stalker outdoor guide who's following you around contacted me on a dating site. Sure enough, I look at his profile and it's him. No question. She takes a bunch of screenshots of what I can gather is his About Me section and texts them to me. They are the ramblings of a madman. I'd post the screenshots, but they'd probably give him away, and I don't want to bear the wrath. Every summer of my childhood, my whole family would travel to stay at my grandparents' home in a small town in Ohio. They didn't have a big house, so all 4 of us girls had to share a room, with me and my oldest cousin in one bed and my 2 middle cousins in the other. It was incredibly cramped, so we would try to stay outside as much as possible, attempting to find something to do. This particular summer I was 9 and my cousins were 12, 13, and 16. It was the late 90s and we were bored out of our minds. So when the oldest said that she was taking a walk, we all begged to come along. I knew she was only taking a walk though so she could sneak out to smoke, but I didn't care. I just wanted out of the house. We'd usually walk for about a mile, go to McDonald's or a drugstore for snacks, then turn around and go home. It was evening and we were on our way back. I was getting bored, the novelty of leaving the house having worn off. The 2 middle girls were walking ahead, talking about boy bands, and the oldest was hanging behind, trying to hide the fact that she was smoking. Suddenly, I noticed a man with a dog about half a block behind us. I was so excited and hoped that he would get close enough that I could pet the dog. Sure enough, he starts getting closer. I didn't think the oldest was paying attention and the middle girls were way ahead, so I figured I could stay behind a bit and play with the dog. I start to walk toward the dog when my cousin grabs me and pulls me close. Don't, she whispers. He has a knife, just keep walking. I glanced behind us and sure enough, the man is holding a knife. He didn't say anything, he just kept following and staring at us. I had no idea that she was paying attention, let alone closely enough to notice the knife, but I'm glad she was. My cousin took me by the hand and hurried me home, trying to put as much space as possible between us and the man. We finally got home and ran inside. Thankfully, we never found out what he was going to use the knife for and we never saw him again. We also never walked after dark again. All of us are mothers now, and the idea of our kids being in this situation is terrifying. We try not to be helicopter moms, but we always try to have at least one of us with the kids and make sure the kids know the importance of being aware of their surroundings. There can be very scary people even in areas that feel safe. Oh, and my cousin quit smoking and got really into healthy living, so that's good too. I'm not sure if this is the right subreddit for this, but I for sure hope to never meet this POS again. This happened to me in high school when I was in 11th grade. I was 16 years old. The street I lived in was in New York City, and it was a pretty small street, so you could hear anything that happened at each end of it. You can hear kids laughing, kids falling from bikes, etc. This is an important detail for the story. Another important one is the house I lived in only had one front entrance to get into. The front entrance had 2 doors, a screen door, which was the first thing an outsider would see when they approached my house, and a wooden door. Both had locks, so nobody could just open the screen door unless they had a key. I note this due to all the videos I watched online of people just yanking screen doors open. I was living alone for a month and it was pretty fun and mundane. My parents were living in California at the time due to work. One day, while I was on my computer doing something, there were these strong knocks on the screen's front door. I left my room and approached the front wooden door cautiously. I'm an easily anxious person and it does not help that I keep watching crime documentary videos. The person on the other side knocked on my screen door again. I peered through the peephole of the wooden door and could see that this white middle-aged dude just standing there, moving his head side to side, and his body was doing those jumpy movements that people do when they are standing and waiting. I decided to open the wooden door a little bit, thinking the screen front door was going to protect me anyway, and asked him, "What's wrong?" The guy instantly responded, "There's been a car crash. Please come out here and help me. A kid that was riding his bike was run over." I asked, "Where is the car crash?" The guy responded, "Down the street over there." He pointed to one of the ends of the street. Remember how I said the street was small and I could hear anything? Even a kid falling from his bike, so I sure as heck could have been able to hear a freaking crash. The second he said that, my guard immediately went up, and while I was quite scared, I was also mad for some reason. "Call the police. I don't know why you're coming to me." The guy pushed on with what he was saying before and asked me to come out to see the car crash with him and to see if there's anything we could do to help. I remember saying, "Call 911 or I will. They'll be able to handle this much better than I can." I then closed the wooden door and locked it. If you're wondering, I didn't call the police. I just went to my room and watched YouTube videos. I know it's a weird thing to do, but I was trying to calm myself down because at that point my heart was beating so fast. I kept looking at the time. I forgot what specific time it was, but I remember it being in the afternoon. The sky was bright blue at least. I waited for a few hours when I was sure the guy would be gone. I went back to the front entrance and opened the wooden door, made sure nobody was there, and opened the screen door to see the car crash at the end of the street. Why did I do this? I wanted to truly make sure that there was no car crash. I know I said I would have heard it, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't ignoring an actual thing that I just happened to not hear. There was nothing there. No kid and no crashed car. Just the usual street end that I'm used to. At that time, I felt a sense of relief. It was only a few years later when I thought about this moment again and realized that God may have had some malicious intention for me. Good thing I kept myself level-headed and realized that there's no way there could have been a crash without me hearing. Who knows what the heck would have happened. I'm still relatively new to Reddit, so I don't really know too much about it. I am a fan of YouTube videos though. When I'm doing things around the house, I like to listen to readings on YouTube of Reddit stories, both hilarious and terrifying ones. One day, as I was cleaning, a video I was listening to finished and automatically played the next one, which was a stalker story reading. After hearing other people's encounters, I decided that maybe I'm ready to share one of mine too. I posted a story of mine earlier and I got a lot of positive reinforcement, so I think that I want to post another one. This is an encounter that went on over the span of maybe a month, then continued on from a distance for the next 2 years. This is a pretty long story, so I'm sorry if it gets boring. Growing up, I lived in a really small town. I don't mean footloose small. With a mere 14,000 people, I mean really small, with only 1,000 people when I moved here in the first grade. I didn't make any close friends all throughout my school days and wanted to get pretty far away. The farthest my parents would let me go for school, though, was a few states over to study Japanese at a private university in Ohio. My freshman year flew by. I met a ton of new people, and my Facebook exploded with friend requests from both domestic and international students alike. Not remembering everyone I met, I accepted them all. I was young and excited to make new friends. I ended up making a lot of good ones. I was actually kind of, dare I say it, popular. By my second year, the leader of my department had deemed me the big sister of the program. It was a small program, but I was usually the one that people would turn to for help. I was good at what I was studying and I was proud. There was a building on campus that was open 24 hours for students. It had couches, armchairs, and coffee tables on one half and tables and regular chairs on the other, separated by a big fireplace. There was also 2 little secluded loft areas for small groups that wanted a little more privacy. People would go there to study or even to just hang out with friends. There was a cafe attached to it, so it made it ideal for a study spot. Coffee plus students equal productiveness. Because I am a coffee fanatic, Some might say coffee snob. I was always in the study building where I had access to coffee when I wasn't in class or catching those oh so rare hours to sleep. The only problem, well, if you can call it a problem, was that because I was the go-to person for the program, I would only sit down for a few minutes before somebody would come up and sit with me, be it to study or to chat. Usually the latter. When the end of sophomore year was rolling around, the dreaded exam time was approaching quickly. I was studying abroad my junior year and wanted to leave my school on a positive note. I was desperately trying to get some studying done, but people kept stopping to chat with me in the study building. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining like, oh wow, I'm so popular I can't even stand it. No, I loved my friends, but they couldn't really grasp the concept of silent studying. A few of them were already done with exams and just wanted to talk. I decided to try my luck in the library. Instead of heading to the story building, I went to the library and sat down at one of the little tables by a big window. I was on a roll. I had gotten through quite a few big projects and finished writing one of my presentations. I sat up a little straighter and stretched out my arms in front of me, letting out a satisfied sigh. A voice from behind me suddenly said, "Working hard?" The library wasn't a popular space to study. Everyone usually went to the study building or got some private rooms on the other side of the building, so the sudden voice behind me made me jump a bit. Yeah, I replied. He was a Chinese guy on the heavier side, a few inches taller than me. Sorry, do I know you? Now, I don't remember his name, so for this story, I'll just call him Chen. Yeah, we met at orientation. We are friends on Facebook, he said. His English was good, but sometimes his accent was hard to understand. He still didn't give me his name, but he looked at me so expectantly that I felt bad for not remembering him. Oh yeah, I blurted out. It's nice to see you. How are finals going? We talked a little bit about school and some other small talk. It was getting late though, so I excused myself to go back to my shared house for the evening. The next day, I avoided the study building again, hoping to get the same amount of studying done that I had the day before. I walked quietly into the hall, glancing around. I didn't see Chen, so I went to my table from the day before and sat down. It wasn't 15 minutes before he appeared though, sitting down next to me and trying to strike up a convo. I was a little bit annoyed, but I stayed polite. I excused myself after about an hour of awkward conversation with the stranger and gave up for the evening. It was still early, but I grabbed some friends and we went out for dinner at a local diner. The next day, I decided to try again. I went into the library and, much to my dismay, I saw him sitting at my favorite table. At first I was annoyed, but then I thought, wait a second, he is here first, so I can just grab a different table and he won't notice. I walked to the other side of the room, passing rows and rows of bookshelves, and sat down at a corner table. If he found me, it would have to be because he was actively looking. About an hour later, I heard footsteps heading around the quiet room. Then a quickened pace headed straight for me. Hey. I groaned internally, but put on a polite smile. Hey there. He had brought his stuff and sat down across from me. After a painful half hour, I finally gave up and decided to head home. The next day, I decided to talk to the front desk about getting a private room. They were on a different floor, so surely I'd be safe there. Nope, he found me. After knocking repeatedly on the door and staring at me, I could no longer pretend that I didn't see him or hear him, even with my headphones on. If I waited much longer, I'm sure the other people in the area would be just as annoyed as I am, so I didn't want to ruin their study time. I opened the door. Oh hey, I was actually just getting ready to leave. I lied. So soon? I was hoping you could check my English paper. Ah man, way to make me feel guilty. Well, I could spare a few. Cool. He pushed his way in, sitting down at the table. Sighing, I sat back down and took his paper. As I started checking it, he started talking about how he had never shared a meal with a girl before because he thinks it's such an intimate thing. I was checking his paper as quickly as I could, trying to get away from the awkward encounter, so I let out the occasional, and head nod, barely listening. Suddenly, he starts pulling food out of his bag from a nearby Chinese restaurant and hands me a fork. I'm sitting there thinking, wait, what? He just said he thinks sharing food with a girl is intimate. Luckily, I was able to form words. Your paper looks good. I don't see any real English mistakes. I can't stay though. I have plans to eat dinner with some friends. Sorry. I passed him his paper, stood up and left, slightly creeped out. I would have blamed it on cultural differences, but I knew a ton of other Chinese kids on campus and none of them were as weird as Chen. In fact, I was close to a lot of the other Chinese kids because they were so cool. But Chen was giving off some really scary vibes and I didn't want to see him again. The next day, I decided it would be better to just study at the study building. I'd rather be surrounded by chatterbox friends than alone with a creepy stranger. The loft was open when I arrived. You have to climb stairs to get to it, and you can't really tell if anyone was up there, let alone who, unless you are really trying to look up through the cracks or go halfway up the stairs. Practically giddy with joy, I rush up the stairs and settle into the armchair with a cup of coffee from the cafe. The giddiness of finding the loft open quickly wore off, though, as I went into the productive mode. I got a lot of studying done, but after about 2 hours, movement downstairs caught my eye. Chen was walking around, looking around the open floor. I took a deep, quiet breath and tried to push the paranoia down. No big deal, right? Maybe he was just tired of the library and wanted to study in this building for a change, for the first time in 2 years. Then I heard it. Those awful words. He was asking a group of people I knew if they'd seen me, asking about me by name. Luckily, they arrived after me and didn't see me go up into the loft. I was safe. He looked around a little bit more and finally left. The next day, I promised a Japanese friend of mine that I'd help him with his paper. My friend was a 6.5 foot tall, ripped like a quarterback phenomenon of a man named Tetsuo. We agreed to meet in the loft at a set time, and I arrived a bit early to make sure that we could actually get the loft since they were a bit popular. I was sitting in the armchair when I heard him start coming up the stairs. He was 15 minutes early. How very Japanese, I thought jokingly. My heart dropped when I looked up, though. Not Tetsuo. Chen. He silently stalked over to the sofa, dropped his things, and sat on the coffee table in front of me. He put a hand on each of the arms of the chair, locking me in, and proceeded to forcefully kiss me. He was bigger than me in both height and weight, so it took a lot to push him off me. I'm sure that the rush of adrenaline helped. "What are you doing?" I shrieked. "I'm in love with you. I want to be with you, and I want you to marry me and move back to China with me and start a family with me." He started to lean in again. I leaned back and tried to push him away. "Get away from me." He leaned back a little, but kept his hands on the arms of the chair and his knees on either side of mine, locking me in so I couldn't get away. What's wrong? What's wrong? Did he really just ask me that? Was he stupid as well as crazy? You. No. Just no. Get away from me. I tried to wiggle free, but he was stronger than me. "I don't even know you." "But I know you," he said. "I need you and I love you." I was about to scream for help when Tetsuo came pounding up the stairs in a rush. Chen may have been bigger than me, but Tetsuo was way bigger than Chen. He looked right at me, asking me in Japanese, "Are you okay?" I replied in Japanese, saying, "Help me." He started walking towards us, and Chen immediately leant back and let me go. Tetsuo took my hand, pulling me to sit on the sofa right next to him, saying in English, "You promised to help me with my English paper." I was shaking, but I felt significantly safer with Tetsuo there to help me. He could easily take down Chen if it came to that. Chen didn't leave. He sat in the armchair I had just vacated and waited. Did he think that Tetsuo would just leave and he could continue to harass me? We finished Tetsuo's paper in about an hour. I took my time explaining certain grammar points and spelling patterns, hoping that we could take long enough and Chen would give up and go away. But he didn't. Tetsuo got up and stood between my stalker and me. "Let's get some dinner." He picked up my stuff, took my hand, and pulled me down the stairs without a second glance at Chen. We didn't get dinner. For obvious reasons, I didn't have an appetite. Tetsuo did walk me home though, and I told him all about Chen. He said that until finals were over and until I left the university to go home for the summer, he would act as my bodyguard. He said he would take me to all my classes and stay with me outside of class. He was true to his word, but Chen always was within view. The day of my last exam and the day I was leaving, I met with Tetsuo in the study building. We looked around and didn't see Chen. With that, I said I was going to buy a coffee from the cafe. Upon entering the cafe, I rushed to the counter and ordered my usual, a medium black coffee. My blood turned to ice as a voice behind me said, "Make it a large one on me." Chen. He was always hidden in the cafe, knowing that I would be going there for my coffee like always. "Nah," I told the woman behind the counter. "My usual medium, please. I'll be paying for it myself, too." "Let me," he insisted. There was a little bit of back and forth between us. Thinking that we were a couple or something, the woman behind the counter smiled and said, Just let the guy get you a cup of coffee." I begrudgingly agreed and rushed away as soon as it was in my hand. He was still paying. He caught up to me before I could reach Tetsuo, though. So close. There was a pillar in the way, though, so Tetsuo couldn't see me. Every time I tried to move, Chen stepped into my path and stopped me. He began begging again. Marriage, family, China. No, no, and no. Tetsuo realized I was taking too long and came to rescue me, telling Chen to stay away from me. As we were walking away, Chen said, "I won't give up. Not ever. Not even if you marry someone else." I took my last exam and moved back to Illinois that evening. I did find Chen on my Facebook and blocked him. It wasn't hard to locate him after he started liking all my photos. I studied abroad in Japan for a year and had to go back for my uni for senior year. I had a boyfriend then who is now my husband. A friend and I rented a house just off campus, but the internet wasn't going to be set up for another few days, so I went to use the free Wi-Fi at the study building. While I was talking to my boyfriend, who was still in Japan, Chen appeared in front of me. He immediately began trying to talk to me, then noticed I was talking on the phone and decided to stand there silently staring and waiting. My blood went cold again and I began to panic, telling my boyfriend in Japanese what was happening. I told him about Chen while we were in Japan. He told me to run away or to find somebody nearby to help. Instead, the anger in me began to rise. I wasn't some pitiful little girl that needed help whenever something happened. When I was in Japan, I had experiences that demanded I stand up for myself, and this time wasn't any different. I looked at him and said, "I'm talking to my boyfriend, please leave me alone." He stood there staring at me for what felt like hours, though I'm sure it was only a few moments. After narrowing his eyes and glaring at my phone, he walked away. I managed to avoid him for most of the year, but I always saw him lurking nearby, staring. Because I was almost always surrounded by friends, though, he never dared to come near and beg for marriage again. He tried to approach me more than once when I was alone, but I made it clear to him that I would scream if he touched me. I kept to public places and made sure to never ever be in an empty place. I think it helped that Tetsuo was usually by my side too. I live in Japan now with my husband. It's been 3 years since I graduated and I haven't seen or heard from Chen since. I have lived in New York City all of my life, but this ranks as one of my oddest encounters. I probably owe my life to somebody I only met briefly. It was about 30 years ago and I was coming out of my dentist's, who was located on a desolate side street between Penn Station and 7th Avenue, not far from Macy's Herald Square. At about 6:30 p.m. my dental work finished and the sun was just starting to set. I walked out of the appointment only to run into a man who repeatedly intentionally body slammed me while pretending it was an accident. I had formed an intention to say nothing, but to slowly edge my way closer and closer to the open door of the chock full of nuts and make a quick dash for the entrance. Again and again the man said, "Excuse me, miss," and slammed into me from the street side as I tried to pick my way across the sidewalk to the open door. He must have stepped back and hit me 6 or 8 times when, out of nowhere, a large man stepped forward and said, "Miss, where are you going?" Terrified that they were a tag team, I said, "I'm trying to make my way to the 6th Avenue subway entry at Macy's." This mysterious guy grabbed me and propelled me so quickly the couple of blocks to the subway that my feet didn't touch the ground, even though I was a young woman of large size and a former distance runner who would move with great speed. The mysterious man took me right to the train, then disappeared. My dad said he was probably a plainclothes cop. I never knew who he was or what the other guy was trying to pull, but I will always be grateful for having been saved from something quite potentially bad. I've been lurking on this page for the last 2 years, but I've always been too scared to tell my story. Funnily enough, I stumbled across this thread by complete accident just after my encounter, while looking for a way to rationalize or come to terms with myself over what happened. I've had some creepy encounters in my time, but I've never had something as full-blown as this. This experience single-handedly put my life on hold and gave me a whole range of stress and anxiety. Throwaway account to protect my own identity, as well as being a first-time poster. This happened approximately 2 years ago. I was around 18 and I had been moving houses quite a lot before I finally moved into my current house and also the house these events take place in. I was working at some shitty commission-only job in the city while living in the area of my city known to be extremely rough around the edges and for its high crime rates. A few people in my town drive beautiful sports cars, despite living in crappy houses, and I fell in love with the gold one that I was constantly seeing around the streets. I can't exactly pinpoint exactly where it started, but one day I was leaving my town's shopping center, probably picking up pet food or munchies. Sounds about right, to be honest, when I picked up on a car driving erratically behind me, swerving through multiple lanes of traffic to keep up with me and trying to get my attention. The car was full of men aged 20 to 30, and once they realized I had seen them, They were ecstatic. I passed it off as boys being boys and just some odd cat call, and I turned into a side street so as not to lure them to my house. I was new to the area and didn't realize I turned into a dead-end street that linked back around to the road I was on, and to my annoyance, these guys followed. Not wanting to delay getting home, I decided to just speed like a maniac to my street, pull a U-turn in the side street next to my house, small cars for the win, quickly pull into my driveway, and park the car behind my house and out of view from the street. Satisfied, I took my keys out of the car and walked around to the front door. I remember being a naive idiot, smirking to myself while noticing this car full of guys hadn't made the U-turn in time and were now driving slowly up and down my street looking for me. I felt like a complete badass and went inside. But here's where the creepiness begins. It was about a month or two after that encounter, and to get to work and avoid traffic, I was catching the train to the city, which was right near my house. One day in the afternoon, while coming home from work, there was a semi-trailer driving down the road. Something not uncommon, as my street was off a major road between two towns, and we were constantly upgrading the road. The driver of the truck half leant out the window and started catcalling me. I, being young, just decided to smile at this guy instead, hoping he'd just have a laugh and keep driving. Well, I was wrong. The guy instead turns off his truck and starts running towards me on the street. I had huge headphones in and didn't notice until he tapped me on the shoulder and offered me a cold energy drink. It was the middle of summer and still light outside on the main road. Thinking this guy posed no major threat, I accepted this drink and made small talk. For the life of me, I can't remember if I accidentally slipped up and revealed minor things that could reveal where I lived or even my name. I remember he kept bugging me for a phone number, so I finally just gave up and gave him my actual number, but with a digit changed on the end. This always worked in the past, and I just wanted to go home and chill out. The guy eventually hopped back in his truck and drove off. I remember smiling, thinking how awesome it was that I got a free drink, and then I got a little paranoid thinking that he bugged the can with a tracking device or something. I laughed it off, thinking of how stupid that was, posted the drink on my public Instagram, and went on with my day. A few weeks later, and there were some tradespeople working on my street. They'd occasionally catcall and come up with stupid one-liners that I'd post on my Facebook, laughing with my friends about how forward and amusing they were. I don't know if they were related, but after my experience, anything is possible. I was smoking up quite regularly around this point, and I started to feel paranoid in my home. At first, I brushed it off as a minor side effect of the weed. However, I couldn't quite shake the feeling of being watched. I started to receive phone calls from private numbers that wouldn't say anything on the other end. I joked with my friends about a stalker I had leaving cartons of beer on my driveway and switching the sensor lights on in the backyard near my bedroom window. I had a sensor light on my front porch stop working all of a sudden, and I assumed it had just blown out. I felt completely on edge, like I was being watched through the windows. I'd hear footsteps on my front porch when I was in the living room, and at night I would keep waking up for no reason. I'm a heavy sleeper, so it struck me as odd. I spammed calls to my local police station for weeks, telling them I thought somebody was in my backyard or on my front doorstep. However, by the time they would drive out, they'd take a look around the place, find nothing, see my red eyes, and just assume that I was another paranoid user. Eventually, my cat started acting strange. She started hissing and jumping at my bedroom window, running around the house and howling. I thought she was just seeing a neighborhood cat in the window and banging her tail on the thin glass, making it sound like knocking. Whenever I locked her out of my bedroom to get some sleep, she'd start wailing and panicking, clawing at my door to be let back in, only to once again slam into the window and keep up with her odd behavior. This started happening every night. One day I came home and my mom was livid. She handed me a note that was left on the front door, blamed my ex-boyfriend. He was an abusive POS and demanded I hand it in and go to the police in person. I took the note to the police. I think it said something like "found you, thought you could hide," or something along those lines, so all signs pointed to my ex. I calmly gave the police my ex's number in the note, and we all laughed about it and they promised it would stop. It didn't. My friends started to grow concerned, and I told a few of them that I believed it was my ex. A few of my male friends, bless them, made a game out of waiting for my ex to come back to my house so they could take matters into their own hands. They would drive by a few nights to make sure I was okay, and I started sleeping with the lights on. One night, it was 1 a.m. I was awoken up by my cat howling and my phone ringing off the hook. "Get out of your house now. It's not your ex." It was one of my friends. I panicked, grabbed my cat, packed a bag, and sped to my friend's house. That night, everything fell into place. My friends had noticed a man lightly tapping on my window and staring at me around 12:30. The man noticed he was being watched and quickly peeled off in his gold sports car. While I drove to another friend's house to be consoled, my other friends followed this man half across the city, trying to confront him. Eventually, he turned into a block of apartments and ran inside. Spooked out and deciding they didn't have enough manpower or intimidation, they decided to call it a night, call the cops, and come back later to suss the guy out. The next day, the police turned up at the house, did a small look around and left, claiming that there was no evidence and nothing they could do. A few days later, my friends, not accepting this for an answer, decided to come back to the apartment and start looking around. They asked a few neighbors for a guy matching their description, and while they did know the man, he wasn't very sociable and his car had apparently not been around for a few days. A week later, I received a box of items on my front doorstep and my heart sank. There were photos, dozens of them of me at work, in my house, sleeping, catching the train. Photos of my friends, photos that I didn't even know how they were taken. A small book containing Tumblr, YouTube, and Instagram addresses, my hobbies, where I worked, etc. The most concerning of all was the light bulb to my front porch and some underwear that had gone missing from my clothesline, all neatly piled together in this box. And then it just stopped after that. I never received anything else, and my friends watched my house for a few weeks and saw nothing. The scariest thing is I can never put a face to a name, and I constantly live on the edge of whether or not this will happen again. Sometimes I have sleepless nights, like tonight where I stay awake listening out for a tap at the window or footsteps on the driveway, but nothing ever happens. I met my boyfriend a month after this happened, and even he can't believe me sometimes and calls me paranoid. It's a horrible feeling to feel unsafe in your own home, but it's an even worse feeling to question your own sanity and never know how this all started. I am getting better slowly, but I will admit I'll probably never be the same openly cheerful person I was before. I browse this sub every night before bed, reading all of your encounters, and I'd also like to thank you all for making me feel somewhat included and secure in the community. Even though I don't post often, I always fall asleep feeling less alienated from the world in some horrible, twisted way.